Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 21st, 2025 board meeting. If everyone could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Silic, would you lead us out? I pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If we could have a moment of silence as we remember those fighting for our freedoms, those impacted by the forest fires in California, and also those, pray for the peace in the Middle East to hold, and thank God for the release of the hostages that have made it home. Amen. Introductions to my right.
Good evening, Diana Quast, Town Clerk.
Good evening, Luciana Howitt, Councilwoman.
Supervisor Ed Lachterman.
Deputy Supervisor Sergio Esposito.
Councilman Patrick Murphy.
Okay, for reports to the town, I just want to really give a big kudos to our highway department and all of those that help in the plowing. An excellent job. Had actually gotten a couple of emails saying how grateful people were for the quality of the work done. We also want to make sure that when we do have these snow dates, please do not park in the road. We did do a snow emergency due to the amount, mainly for the parking and to make sure our first responders could get through, because sometimes on our narrow roads, the roads get bottlenecked, and if we can't plow them, it gets even worse. I know it was very successful this time around, according to our highway superintendent, and we'll look at maybe addressing snow advisories and see how we could address that versus doing a full-scale emergency in the future. I also want to give a big, thank you and kudos to our water department. One of our employees driving down 202 today saw a little water coming out off of the side of the road, stopped, and it was an old, very old valve, a style we don't use anymore, over by one of the churches on 202 that had rusted through. And they were able to get in there without much water getting away and without much damage. Also in this weather, of course, you worry about the icing of the roads. So it was way too cold for the road to dry up. They salted it down, but got right on it and got everything taken care of. This is the time of year where we will see the effects of the cold on cast iron and ductile iron and all of those different things. So great job, and thank you all.
I actually am going to wish the fourth graders good luck tomorrow on the simulation for the state test. I know that it's going to seem a bit scary, so anybody at Crampon in fourth grade, I know that that's coming. And also, anyone who has students at Brookside, United for the Troops is collecting for their Valentine's Day boxes. If you have any friends or kids that are there, we can go ahead and have their classroom take it. They can do a note, or they can get something that's non-perishable so that we can send it over to our troops.
All right, Sergio, I'm sorry. Let me just also add in, since you reminded me, if you have a student in the high school, the Leo's Club is doing a cereal collection. They've also asked us to put a box in Town Hall, which I approved for them to do. This time of year, the food banks, they've been hit pretty hard after the holidays. And one of the things that is a big commodity that they have trouble getting is cereal. And every year there's what they call the Super Bowl of Cereal Drive. So I think the Lions last year collected over 300 boxes, and the Leos have picked up on it this year as well. It's a great way to help our community. Cereal is a very easy staple food, and especially for those in need and for kids, it could be breakfast, lunch, and dinner sometimes. I know I had a lot of round-the-clock cereal bowls growing up. Thanks, Serge.
Well, good evening, everybody. I hope everybody's keeping warm. I'm going to keep this short. We have a couple of discussion items on here, and so I just want to wish everybody a great week and hope that you guys all stay warm. And I'm going to pass it on to the gentleman on my left.
Good evening, everybody. Just a couple of little things. I saw Jim Monorano out here before, but he had a very successful polar plunge. Rob Giordano did it. It was cold. They had to get a little backhoe to break through about 4 inches of ice, but they did it. And there was, what, close to 100 people there, Ed?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, it was a nice amount.
We should have had some psychiatric care for those that not for the ones that went in, but for the ones that went in 2, 3, and 4 times afterwards.
Hanging out there.
They were hanging out in the water. The ice was literally 4 inches thick. It was.
So, little shout out to Jim and Bob Giordano and the Friends of the Parks. They did a great job. And then just sort of another little Rich and Mary from the Elks Club. They got 2 more grants. One is for the Freedom Grant for the vets for $1,000, and then they had the Spotlight Grant that they got for local food pantries. Okay, and then also Steve Rosen's stepping down. He's dedicated about 40 years to the Shrub Oak sports, and he's stepping down. He's going to stay on the basketball director, but it was 40 years of his life that the guy has volunteered for the Shrub Oak. So.
Shrub Oak Athletic Club,
Yes,
yeah. Steve, great guy.
He's a great guy, and he deserves a little of recognition for 40 years. And then that's about library. The library, they did their final numbers. So circulation wise, they had 372,000 books and ebooks and circulations going through the library over there. They did a phenomenal job. And to push them over the edge, they hired this guy, Colin. And Colin has really been active in trying to bring the youth and the kids and the families. So it's a one-stop shop. He's added a lot to the library. So a little shout out to you, Colin. Okay, Susan, all you.
Just good evening and stay warm.
Amen to that.
Boy, that was short.
Sorry to see so few people here tonight. We've got our regulars,
It's a little cold out there. David, anything for you?
I just want to give a shout out to the men and women of town of Yorktown that did a yeoman's job. That was for that 5 inches of snow. We were out for the better part of 15 hours and straight through the night, no break. And they just did a fantastic job. We were very, very concerned about the hard refreeze coming this week, and anything slushy left on the roads would have turned to ice, and we had none of that. So great job for you folks at home. Be very careful the next few days. Until Friday, it's going to be bitter, bitter cold. And when the sun is out during the day, some of this light snow tends to melt, and then it's no longer snow. Then it becomes black ice. So just, particularly on elevated surfaces like your porch or your deck, anything like that, just be real conscious of your stairs and, stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. And Dave, I'll give you a big kudos. Dave met me Saturday afternoon. We had gone over all the planning. They really, your men and women rock and rolled over there, and everything was set to go, so they were able to hit the ground running.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
All right. Poet Laureate is not with us today, but Sergio, I think you had something?
Yep, John McMullen sent me a poem. He is still in rehab, so we wish him a speedy recovery, but he was joking around in his email to me that he's scribbling again. So here is his scribble. It's called Dry Period by John F. McMullen. Many writers have times of what are called dry periods, blocks of time that they are unproductive. In the time that I've been writing for publication, perhaps 36 years, I've had few, if any. I certainly have had none in the 28 years that I have been writing poetry, thousands of poems, multi-hundreds published, 14 books published, until last November when I fell and broke my hip. It is now the end of January, and this offering is my first. It was first a hospital for an operation, and then a rehab center to restore me, to restore my basic skills. It is a nice place, with competent staff, nice friendly support people, single rooms with large screen 50-channel TVs, terrible food, many services and activities, and it is near me, and it is near my home, so my wife can visit daily, bringing food, books, and our puppy. And this is the first poem that I have written in all that time. First, for at least a month, the only thoughts were of pain and survival. Then, for over a month, I would occasionally think I should be writing, but it would be too much trouble. Then, for a short period, I would think of topics that would make a good poem, but never wrote it. But now I wrote this, and I hope you like it, but even if you don't, it means I'm back. By John F. McMullen, 2025.
Thank you, Sergio. I will say that I have heard from people staying there that the food is not a Michelin rated restaurant. Let's put it that way.
Well, let's not mention the place.
I did not mention it. I did not mention it. But I do know that if you're an Uber driver in the area, you can make a heck of a lot of money delivering there. All right. I'd like to read in a proclamation observance of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of equality and achieving social change through nonviolence has helped shape our nation, and whereas this week we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday and remember his legacy as an American hero and tireless social activist who called upon our nation to ensure equal justice under the law and to uphold our founding principles, which recognize individual rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. encouraged Americans to come together, regardless of age, race, or creed, to alleviate poverty and value the dignity and respect inherent in all people, through his example, he taught the values of courage, truth, justice, compassion, humility, and service to strengthen our communities. Now, be it resolved that, wrong one. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Edward A. Lachterman, Supervisor of the Town of Yorktown, along with the Town Board, recognize January 20th, 2025 as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day and encourage all residents to act for the future betterment of our community. Just some very valuable teachings and lessons from Dr. King, and his message is not lost upon us today, and we are a much better society for what he's contributed. All right, we will move to personnel. From the Office of Human Resources, we are going to assign Sergeant Matthew Rasiopo at the discretion of the Chief of Police as Detective Sergeant in the Yorktown Police Department. We will appoint Richard DeMellis to the position of Deputy Town Supervisor. And thank you. Sorry. It is one of those evenings.
You getting rid of me already?
I am.
Wow.
We appoint
quick.
Richard DeMellis to the position of Deputy Town Assessor. I still call myself a councilman sometimes. So, approve
We
the
can all be many things.
Let me out.
approve the transfer of Jake Vaccaro from the Water Department to the Refuse and Recycling Department as a motor equipment operator. May I have a motion?
The deputy supervisor makes the motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And congratulations to all, Matt and Rich, on your promotions, and Jake, good luck on your transfer. And thank you all for your services.
Best of luck. Yep.
Moving forward, yes. All right, so we have right now solar panel moratorium and a battery energy storage system moratorium. And we need to have a little discussion on that so we could start to finalize a law. We could start with the solar panels, and some of this might actually even affect battery energy storage systems. Right now, we were all at different places in our feelings on the solar panels. So, the things that we are looking at, in my opinion, and you guys could contribute and jump in on that as we finish up, or I finish up. I look at three things. Do we allow it in residential with proper screening and looking at it? Do we allow it in commercial? Do we allow it in both residential and commercial? Or do we disallow it all through Yorktown? Those are really the four options at this point. I did do some checking with with the neighboring towns when I went to the east. There's a lot of disallowing it. When you move west, there's allowing it under specifics and screening, and I don't know if we have the commercial property per se that would allow it for it. But that's sort of where we are with that. One of the tie-ins, though, some of these have battery energy storage systems attached to it. And when we get into the battery energy storage systems, like, I'm very conflicted on the safety. I do not think they belong in residential neighborhoods. And I think also science-wise, we need to consider moving away from the lithium-ion batteries, which are the ones that overheat and then build up that heat and are impossible to put out, to the lithium phosphate. We did have Mark Iannucci, and I'm drawing a blank on the other gentleman's name, though, from Sustainable Westchester come up. And Leo, thank you. Leo Wigman came up, and Leo spoke about it. And, both of them took, I think, a very good approach in the fact that they weren't going to talk for or against. They were just going to talk about what's out there. What the capabilities are, what the dangers are. I know John has been trying to get us a firefighter who had to deal with one of them to speak with, but I do have a concern about lithium ion, even with the containment systems that are there. So, that's where we stand. So if you guys want to start with the solar panels and let me know where you are with that, I think that would be a good start. Susan, sure.
I've done a lot of reading and research, and I've been sending some things to the board, and we also got a very interesting memo today from an urban planner. I think what you outlined in terms of allowing in residential, which our current law allows in all residential but not in commercial. So it's either all residential or no residential, no commercial, allowing it in all or disallowing it. I think the issue is what site is suited for solar, and I think we should look at it that way, which is why I'm recommending to the board that they consider a concept called an overlay, a floating zone that says we will allow floating zones. We will allow solar farms. We're only talking large scale. Let everyone be clear. Large scale industrial solar farms. We're not talking about a few solar panels on your ground in your home.
And we're talking about ground mount, right? Just so people understand.
And only ground mount. Thanks for the clarification. We take a look at the parcel. Is the parcel suitable? Will the parcel require cutting down hundreds of trees? To what extent can the panels, if we allow them, be visible? Can it be screened? And the topography varies. Anyone who's been at a recent planning board discussion where the issue was setbacks, even with a 200-foot setback, because of the topography of the site and the abutting homes, it would still be visible. So you could talk, we've gone from 50-foot setbacks to 100-foot setbacks. We're talking 200-foot setbacks. Setbacks don't deal with the issue. The screening doesn't deal with the issue. We have experience where we have solar farms, which we don't even know that they exist. If anyone went to Hemlock Hill Farm or Arcadia Farm, okay, no one would know that there's a solar farm there. That's perfectly acceptable. If you go to Hill Boulevard, then you definitely know there's a solar farm. If you go to Foothill, you definitely know there's a solar farm. If we do it on a floating zone concept, somebody comes, let's, for argument's sake, and this is just for argument's sake, we allow it any place. Somebody comes and says, this is the parcel, I want to have a solar farm this size, and will require cutting down 20 trees or 300 trees, whatever. The town board looks at the site, looks at all of the issues, and then say, Yes, and we set up criteria, just the way in the overlay law there is criteria. We set up criteria. Yes, you meet the criteria. This will be acceptable. We will rezone that. We will zone that parcel for solar, and now you go to the planning board for site plan review. Just in a way that the overlay law works. We might look at it and say, no, it doesn't work because you're going to negatively impact the residential neighborhood. The screening is not possible, or you're going to cut down too many trees. Okay, and we do value in the code. It says we're supposed to value our trees and woodlands. So we look at it on a case-by-case basis. Instead of now, it just says any residential as long as it's 5 acres, period. That's what we say. And the priorities that the law gives us, it should first be pasture land, and then at the end it says, and don't disturb sites in natural state. But there's no way of enforcing that. So we are cutting down so many trees, and I think even you, Sergio, have said in some cases we're cutting down 1,000 trees. It doesn't make sense. There's no net gain.
That's correct.
So we have to. So we should look at something on an individual level. The village of the town of Ossining has this example. Okay, that's the model. The concept of a floating zone has been in existence for decades, and in the memo I gave to the town board, there are lots of examples of other municipalities that have used them. In fact, Yorktown already has that dealing with agricultural land. It's never, to my knowledge, it's never been used. But the concept of a floating zone is already in our code. So I would urge you to accept this. Then you could say residential, yes, industrial, no. But when the law was adopted in 2020, I think the thinking was, we have very little land left for commercial use. Let's not take away our commercial use. I mean, that was the thinking, I think, at the time. I don't know if we should still limit it to that and just say only residential, because times have changed, and what is zoned commercial now may no longer be valuable for commercial use. Look, we changed where Guiding Eyes is going in. Okay, was prime commercial area, and the board decided that it's not going to likely work out for commercial the way we zoned it, the way we wanted it. So they're allowing this other use, which is a positive use for Yorktown.
So let me ask you a question, Susan, and actually it might even be for our clerk. If we're doing a floating zone and we're making decisions at here, is it a work session item? Is it a public hearing because it's a decision process, or Adam?
Oh, it would be definitely public hearing, just like a rezoning, just the way we do it with the overlay law.
You would have to create the law.
It would have to
The
create.
town attorney should probably speak on that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Adam?
to identify what the floating zone is and how it would
Well,
be used.
you need to go through this process first. We'd have to have a public hearing on amendments to a zoning code. We're talking about this idea would require a whole rewrite of the solar law. But yeah, it's a new legislative action, so it would require a public hearing.
Yeah, and then when
A separate one later on.
we would adopt the law, okay? But it doesn't apply to anything. It's just a floating zone. It's a concept. Then we wait until somebody comes in and they say, I would like to apply under this thing. That would be subject to first, the law would obviously be subject to public hearing, but then when developer X or property owner X comes in, that would be subject to the full public hearing process, okay? And you could write into the law all of the criteria that currently exist, but when the planning board then reviews site plans, setbacks, screening, and the whole kit and
Because then you
caboodle.
could see if it fits into the floating zone based on the criteria that's already there.
There's initial criteria, and I think in that James memo that we got today, they outline some very basics. For example,
Questions, yeah.
will the screening be possible? All right. How many trees will be cut? If you're going to destroy a woodland with hundreds of trees, you may not want that. Will it be adverse impact on the neighborhood, or is it prime commercial commercially zoned property that you really want to keep for some potential commercial development. The town board makes those general conceptual decisions, just the way it does conceptual for the overlay law. Very conceptual. There are the 8 criteria. Then if you approve it after the public hearing, then it goes to the planning board with all kinds of specifics.
The way to think
Adam,
about
what do
it,
you say?
it's basically like a rezone. A project by project rezone. You could set out certain criteria for the floating zone analysis, right? But you would take it as it effectively would be a rezone.
Yeah, and which in effect, the overlay law is
So,
sort of the same concept.
So let me just, John, could you come up a minute?
Ed, what's the difference between spot zoning and floating
It, there is a difference in the concept of it. See, my concern, to be honest with
Floating
you,
zones are legal. It's a
It's well
established zoning tool. It's
Yeah,
not.
so-
It's not spot zoning.
so
I felt like the planning already looks to make sure that if the trees
Right.
cut down, there's water there, that we don't flood the neighbors, that it's not for it. I don't know where it overlaps.
So, and my concern, to be honest with you, is that we're doubling up the process between town board, planning board, duplicating all the work, duplicating the effort. But the real thing is, we talk about trying to move our agendas a little quicker. I think that we'll be tying up. John, how many projects do we get a year approximately that come in looking for?
For solar,
Yeah.
since 2021, when the law was enacted, we probably had about 12 or so that have come through. Not all of them have finished, some have
Right.
gone away, but 3 to 4 a year
Right.
so far.
So if it's for a year,
They're starting to slow down, by the way.
okay,
it's starting to slow down because
because we have a moratorium.
I think we've sent
No,
we've sent the shot across the
no,
bow
no.
that Yorktown
No,
isn't really.
it was
fond
slowing down
of the
before you did the
situation.
moratorium.
All right.
No,
Okay.
I think it also has to do with, Sergio, like you were saying, like cutting down the trees and whatnot. Like the trees drink water. Like some people don't know how to maintain some of these ground mounts. They don't know how to clean them. They don't know how to,
Well,
what's
the people
working.
don't maintain them, the companies do.
No, I get it, but that also goes,
I've never seen one that's well maintained, but
the ones
okay.
in Mount Pleasant.
Ed, to your point about you're doubling up the work, you're increasing the work of the town board. I think how our land is used is a very critical function of the town board. And this is a very basic function to say what we perceive as a vision for our town, whether we're going to allow industrial uses in any residential neighborhood. The way the law is written now, where you say any residential neighborhood, at least it's 5 acres, then automatically it goes to the planning board with certain very specific requirements. It limits the ability of the planning board, because if you meet those 5 criteria in the planning board, in the law, planning board basically has no choice. They almost have to give the approval. Right? This way, the town board, which I think is the body that determines land use in this community, it's the town board that makes all the zoning.
Well, if we determine the use and the zoning and put it into law, then it avoids the backlog coming through here. So if you're going to something with a public hearing, you have your maybe 2 meetings, you refer it out, what is a referral, 20 days on? Typically a month. Then it comes back, then you have your hearings, then you have that. So you're looking at probably 4 meetings, and a lot of time, if you're looking at 3 to 4 times a year, you could, and yes, it's slowing down right now. Maybe it picks up, maybe it doesn't. But I'm just looking at a possibility
You
of
enact that law, it'll pick up.
16 meetings that are dedicated out of 50 that are dedicated to reviewing a solar project that will review back out to planning.
So if I could just chime in, Susan, are you good? Okay. So you went through do we allow it in commercial? Do we allow it in residential? Or do we totally disallow it?
Right.
I want to totally disallow it. I'm going to be straight up. I've been upfront and honest with everybody since the very beginning. These things are ugly. They're never well maintained. They come in, they mow everything, they do everything beautiful, and they walk away, and it looks like a disaster. And I don't want that in we're talking about specifically large-scale ground mount solar. I don't want that in Yorktown. Do I want solar in Yorktown? Absolutely. I'm a big fan of rooftops. We could retrofit our buildings. I know Larry Killian spoke about if we make our own solar, we could power our own vehicles and save a lot on gas. Correct, Larry? So But as far as large-scale ground-mount solar, I'm against it. And it's not to say I'm against solar, because I think we have to be responsible to some degree. But I think there are different ways that we could achieve that goal. If we don't go down that route where it's totally disallowed, then we have to implement the 200-foot setback. And I'd be a proponent of raising the 5-acre lot size to 20 acres. Okay, further limiting where these properties would be available. Now, I did say, and I stand behind it, and I got pushback from everybody, that a perfect place would be our farms. And if you look at the priorities, in our current law, it says we prioritize placement first on agricultural or greenfield properties in areas that are presently cleared. A farm would fall under that category quite nicely. And farms aren't really, this isn't the 1800s. We're not this agricultural, mega place anymore, the United States is. And so, our farms are struggling, and they could use financial help. Now, I know I got pushback that how are you going to do it? It's the zone, it's this. I recommended that we actually list the farms that we have as specific sites that we determine would be a good site for something like that. So this way we don't get these little pocket farms that we have that are pieces of property that are considered farms anyway that are in residential zones. We could actually spell it out, these larger farms. What criteria would that be? I don't know. This is a discussion, right? Maybe that could be part of our discussion on how we select and specifically list the places, the farms that we say, okay, it could possibly be allowed. Susan, I understand the whole concept of floating zones. And I understand what Ed's saying. I mean, we're just adding, red tape to things. You put out a floating zone, it maintains the possibility that you can have ground mount solar in a residential neighborhood. I don't want that possibility. I just don't. I don't think they belong there. Case in point, the 2 farms that you pointed out, you don't even know they're there. And they're contributing to the survival of the farms, which I think Yorktown has, 7 or 8? So that's where I'm at. Now, if we're going to go down the path where we're going to allow ground mount solar, then I would say I'd be aggressive, highly aggressive, on the lot size, on the setbacks, on the visual acuity of it all, and that kind of stuff. But to be quite honest, at this point, the only thing I would probably vote for is a total disallowance in residential zones.
So, John, quick question. Most of the ground-mounted solars, for them to be profitable, viable, most of them want the battery energy storage? Yes, no?
No, not necessarily. They're starting to move to that, to have the battery storage to save the energy that they're producing that's not being used. But they did not start out, and it is not a necessity to have battery storage in order to have the solar farm.
If they're close to the grid, right, can they just, they still need the battery storage to return energy to the grid? They don't.
They don't need
Right,
the
that's
battery
why
storage.
it's preferential to be next to.
They don't need the battery storage to function. No.
Yeah, but the battery storage helps them out because they get to determine where that energy goes.
It helps the
versus
grid out. Yeah, it helps them and the grid out. Yeah, definitely.
But it's definitely not a necessity.
No, I know it's not a necessity, but if you put 2 and 2 together, you would assume that they would want the battery storage as part of the system, the whole system.
Yeah, it makes it more efficient.
It makes it more sense. Yeah. But my view on the battery storage is it just brings in the safety, fires, all that stuff. And I'm a big proponent, whether it's the solar panels or whether it's the battery storage. 20 years from now, when they want to decommission it and they want to do something, is that bond big enough, or they just walk away? I don't think the bond could ever be big enough, because I just think that too many people just go, it's cheaper to just walk away, and hey, Yorktown, good luck.
Depending on the solar panel, it's not like that. I don't know if there are. I believe somebody said that there are new solar panels now that are biodegradable. but the ones that, not really, right? So
No, there
so-
may be. I'm just saying, I don't know if that, I haven't seen that
Yeah,
coming.
I haven't seen it either. I'm just throwing.
I
it
wouldn't
all out
rely
there.
on
Wanna be-
that, even if it was coming into play, of leaving it there. I
Right,
just wouldn't.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, but it would probably be very, very expensive 20 years from now, 25
Well,
years from
you
now.
know, you can
And
require.
then by the time you put all the trees back in to reforest the area, you're looking at another 25 years, unless you put in 70-foot trees, and there you go. Now you have an instant forest. And
Well,
it's
you-
just,
You're not going to have an instant forest, and the
Answer's
forest is not
no.
going to remain there from a practical point of view anyway.
I think there's a lot of dangers that are there. And to be honest, I've experienced 5 different experiences of different people that have had dryers completely catch on fire, whether in our town or a little bit down county. And I've been pushing these fire safety blankets and I'm thinking these are people who clean the lint. They even have the little weird brushes, and things are just not made. I feel like there's so many shortcuts in the world, and I see it every day, even when I teach executive functioning stuff, that whoever's making them, they could be engineers, they could be doctors, they could have all the degrees on the wall. If they miss one button or something and that explodes, it's.
But I don't think solar panels can
Anything can
explode.
happen.
No, I'm
The
not saying
battery-
that, but the
yeah.
battery storage is.
Yeah, but let's take it out right now because I don't think they belong there. An interesting point was brought up about forestation and the trees. So, not that long ago, Yorktown was a lot of farmland. Probably, Pat, when you were here, there were a lot of
Yes, when I
farms.
grew up, that's all it was, as farm.
Right.
There was 5,000 homes in Yorktown
I
when
think
when I was here.
right. I think the Jacob Road used to be a farm, correct?
Correct.
Yes, most land in Yorktown was a farm at one time. There's
Right.
very little that was not
Right.
being
But
producing.
Isn't that why we're the
agriculture.
Huskers? Weren't they all cornfields or something?
No, there were some apple orchards and other stuff.
yeah, egg farms, a lot of egg farms.
Egg farms, peach orchards.
But that being said, the trees that grow on these properties are not really what we would call prime examples of trees.
A lot of them are invasive.
A lot of them are invasive, and a lot of them are garbage, like your big tulip trees. One of my neighbors,
my tulip tree.
tulip tree broke, landed on his car. There was probably a 14-foot trunk left. A couple days later, that came down on his pickup truck.
oh, man.
2 for 1 out of the tree. But that, there are definitely some concerns of the quality level of those trees, afforestation. We look at we don't have a great forestation plan. And you look out on the West Coast, what happened with the fire. One of the things I was talking about with fire safety last week was Turkey Mountain and the fire plan for there and access roads and how you get in there and how you can how you can put out a fire and what needs to be done there. So there are a lot of concerns with the fact that we don't do a lot to clear our forests and to cultivate and to take out the garbage trees, to clean up. You talk about in our tree law, we talk about how the ground cover and the leaves is very important. But in California, they were experiencing all of that catching on fire, burning down houses. So, I'm not convinced that not looking at trees and doing what we can is the way to go. But I think that one helps the other, and there's a happy medium.
I also think it's our responsibility as a town board and on the tree fund. We can't always call Dave, and then Dave's like, "That's DOT. That's not allowed." There's a lot of like even going down 202, we've got all this water. I mean, I only did landscaping design for a while, but like there are certain trees that thrive in certain terrain, and we don't replace them. Like we always say this native tree, but if you have a really big wetland that's a pocket, we need a tree that wants to drink the water. So maybe that native tree loves this town, but can't sustain all that water. And when it comes to ground cover that you're saying, there are shrubbery that will kind of grow and cover and requires water, can deal with the traffic, can deal with like not having so much sun, being in more shade. And I think we have a beautiful garden club, but we don't get educated in it enough. And then I'm always talking about that tree fund that I'm like, but what can I do with it? I feel we have a tree fund that can actually put in, and I know that we're planting trees, but we might need to plant trees for specific areas to serve us so that it grows and changes the topography, I can't say that word, with us, because there's a lot of different demands.
Just as an aside, the tree commission wants to do a whole inventory using some of the funds that are in the tree fund in order to figure out exactly what we have in Yorktown as far as trees go, and I think that's a wonderful idea.
And I do want to, and I'll pass to you, I do want to name, we have to test our soil. Like Scarsdale's all clay. We have different soils. I can plant like an Annabelle hydrangea and it will be blue and it's supposed to be white because the pH in certain parts of my soil changes actually the fabric of my flowers. So what I'm saying is we have to test our soil. Like some have a lot of nutrients, some don't. Some have too much runoff and too much sediment, some don't. And I think when the tree bank does this thing, we should also go from the ground up. You can't plant roots. Just because you plant roots doesn't mean it's going to sustain if you can't feed it. And I think we have to make sure we're doing that.
I'd like to address points made by Luciana and Sergio. I'll just.
None of my points are worthy?
I'm
just hurt,
I have
Susan.
points. No, for three of you, I have points. I'm not ignoring you, Ed, but that was
okay.
battery storage. We'll talk about that later. Okay.
Well, I'm not offended.
Okay, Ed. I was
Not
at.
yet. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm liaison to the tree commission, and when I was there last week, it was the issue of the fire came up. One, we're talking about town land versus private land. We can't go tell a private landowner what to do and clear his brush and things like that. There is there, and I did say that we should look at using the tree fund money to look at forest management, to look at the fire issue in our plan. We have I think forest management plans for Sylvan Glen and Turkey Mountain. I don't know that they're probably collecting inches and feet of dust is what's happening. All right. So they have to be looked at, but they weren't concerned about fire, and that should definitely be looked at, and for all of our open space. The second point that Sergio, I think you and Ed have made in terms of time. When I ran for town board, okay, my commitment was to put in the time to do the work that was necessary. I'm not trying to look at how I can minimize my work. And if there are more issues that come up, more issues will come up. And as a town board member, it's my responsibility to put more time in. Okay? So the argument that if we do if your only argument about the floating zone, I mean, there could be many arguments.
It's not my only one,
All right,
Susan. I've
but-
expressed
okay.
some.
But,
So
but
there's
nobody
the-
said time. What Ed referred to was inefficiency.
Well, I
so
think-
don't conflate the two, because saying that we don't want to put our time in when we probably put the most time out of anybody here, all right, is just a mischaracterization.
All right,
I'm
but if you're
sorry.
thinking about duplication of work, just think of what we're going through with Navajo and the overlay law, and we're looking at it at the town board, and then it's going to the planning board. So in a way, it's somewhat of the same process, and you don't have a problem with it with the overlay law, but you're going to have a problem with it with the floating zone.
Actually, I do have a
Well,
problem with the overlay law, and it's a little different because we're dealing with someone who wants to be included.
It's
a-
the overlay law in
It's a
general.
much different thing because it's a different district that he wants to include that
But
property.
if
into.
somebody else wanted to come in for the overlay law, you'd have to go through the same process and have in that case, you don't need a public hearing.
No, we would look at the 8 criteria, and we would push, and we
So
would
you would
pass
still
it to the
spend
planning
time.
board.
But time spent all the time. We just talked about replanting the town, and I just gave you, and I'm not even in the garden club, a million things you should do before you go in and say, save the trees. Like, what are you saving?
We're talking
What
about
is the
private
saving
property.
doing?
We're talking about.
But even private property, my neighbor, whatever happened, now he's sold the property. I cut the grass. The trees that he had were being strangled by poison ivy. I have monkeys. I asked him, is this a matter of you not identifying this, or is this a means? Because it could fall both ways. And I don't know if you know insurance, but if it falls on my house and it's your tree, I'm still in trouble. So the way I did it, I cut the things. You can ask Dave. I got no problem cutting the grass. So what I'm saying to you is there is something there. You got guys down here. We live on bedrock, but some of my neighbors have a hill and they live with sub pumps. If they don't maintain their sub pump and it starts bleeding water, where do you think that water goes, Susan? So at some point, you have private property still has to have
No.
some sort of standard.
The fires in California actually started on utility line
Exactly.
property,
Right.
and it ended up spreading I'll tell you what, there are a lot of people that'll tell you that those fires
my neighbor, I'll cut
destroyed
your
all my
grass.
private property. I forget the number,
All right,
but I
but
think they
right
were
now,
talking about
we're
$80
not talking,
billion.
we're not talking about how to deal with fire control on our town property. Let me just get to the other point, Sergio, that you're making. You're saying if you don't, your first choice would be total disallow. I think that's possibly a little too drastic because there might be some sites that might be suitable. Okay. The problem with the agricultural is that one, land is not zoned agricultural, it's zoned residential. So you'd have to say it's zoned residential. What constitutes a farm is a problem in terms of definition. The farms that we have now probably have all qualified through the county agricultural district, which
Of course they do, because they get tax breaks for that, so why would they want to not zone it correctly?
there are other issues. So there are complications with that. And there might be, I do not know, there might be land that's already cleared that isn't used for an agricultural purpose, which might be because of where it's located is a suitable site, just like the Arcadia site, which may or may not have been a farm.
I just don't think this kind of use in a residential zone is suitable.
I agree. I totally agree with the abuses of the law, and that's why I'm glad that we're having this discussion about the need to change the law. What I'm saying is, if you look at it on instead of just having it has to be 10 acres, it has to be a 200-foot setback, it has to be fully screened, and then you argue about what fully screened means. Instead of doing that and giving it to the planning board, we look at each site, okay? There's a site, again, in the Colangelo property on Jacob Road, okay, that even 200 feet wouldn't have been sufficient because of the topography. So we look at it on a case-by-case basis. Yes, it's going to have more work for the town board, no question, but I don't think it's going to be such.
But this solar law also says that if you're not 5,000, 5 acres, or you're not 200, you can't even play. So I hear what you're saying. I think for me personally,
I don't know why the planting is an issue. We're not talking.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying to you is this. You put it under a floating law. It has to check off all the boxes. From the way that it reads for me, if you already don't meet these criteria, and I don't want you in my residential areas, whether you have the space or not, I don't want it, okay? I don't want it either, okay? And that's okay. I'll vote no. And then you could wait till the next councilwoman comes in or man, and they might vote yes. It's freedom of whatever. For me, I think that it causes more harm than not. But for personally, what I'm saying is the way that it reads for me now, if you already are out of this, like out of these like 5 acres, 200, whatever, they won't even bring us the project because it's not even game. And if they bring the project and then the planning board finds that it meets the law, but it doesn't fulfill whatever the criteria is in why it's not proper use for that place, well, then we're giving back planning their stuff. But for us personally, I'm not against solar panels. I'm against them in residential areas. And I also think that agriculturally, listen, farms are struggling, and I understand that, and I'm hoping with this food crisis they'll come back. But a lot of them have useless land, and they get to have the tax write-off because they're under AG, and then they get to do the solar panel, and think about all the electric that has to run there to get from one lamppost to the other and all those acres to make it usable. I see the why. So for me personally, floating or not, this is just saying in Yorktown, if your project doesn't meet these criteria, we don't even play.
So I'm not clear. Do you say you want to ban it from all residential zones?
For me personally, yes. I would love to do that.
All right, so you've got...
But if you have it where it's a residential zone and it's over 5,000 acres and they're going to do, and it's in this whatever, and he's telling me it's over 5 acres, which is whatever square feet it is, and it's fine and you can't see it and it's on their property, well then kumbaya. They could also buy, if I'm not mistaken, they could also have an accessory building there too. It's on some point.
Well, I'm not clear. You're saying if... First, you're saying
I don't want it on residential.
You don't want, period, no matter what the acreage
I like the floating. I like the idea of doing work, and I like it being case by case. And I hear your floating zone. But what I'm saying is the law, the way that it's written, as of right now, that we've already had a public hearing on.
We're changing the law. That's
right,
what.
We're tweaking the law, right? But as of right now, in the conversation, there's a certain criteria in it that's saying if it doesn't even meet these, don't show up at my house.
Then it won't fall under the floating zone.
It won't fall under any of our zone. Doesn't hit our law, right?
That's it, right, you're
I
right.
mean, you can have a floating zone that says it can't be, you can have a floating zone that says it can't be in any residential neighborhood. You're only going to allow it in commercial.
Or you can have just a law that says it can't be there, it can only be commercial, and it's got to be over this amount of acres with this kind of screening. And then if it does fit the needs of planning, then it can go through, and if not,
Well,
it's
but
okay.
the issue is even if,
There would be, I think what Luciana's saying is there would be a minimum set of criteria
Off the bat.
that you'd have to at least meet before it could be considered as a
Yes,
floating zone.
absolutely.
That's all I'm saying.
You made it sound like everywhere could be a
No,
floating zone, and
no.
it's up to us.
I said they have to
And
be-
you also, again, once
No.
again, you mischaracterized what Ed said and what I agreed with, that we're like, we don't want to work, and that's not what he said. So I am going to stop you every time you mischaracterize what we said.
did.
Yes, you did. And so I will stop and I will correct it every time, because he did not say that we didn't want to do the work. What he said was it's inefficient and it doesn't, it's just not expedient as far as government works. And that's part of the problem with government everywhere. It's too much red tape.
Luciana, here in this memo that we got from the planning firm, it says possible criteria for the mapping of a floating zone. One, the property is not in a natural state. In other words, we're not going to cut down hundreds of trees.
Yeah,
which-
no,
which is-
Susan, I thought those were good questions. I guess what I'm saying is, if we have a chance to talk about the solar law that we are talking about right now, this solar panel law, what I'm saying is, why can't we just make the law tight so that what's presented here is already in our wishes of what we see as the visionaries for Yorktown?
What I'm saying, but if you tighten up the existing law, and let's say you increase the setback from 100 feet to 200 feet, what I'm saying is 200 feet may not work on certain properties. You're telling the planning board, okay, 200 feet, that's fine, but it's not going to work, like it's not going to work for some properties on the Colangelo site, okay? So that's why you have to look at it site by site, too. 50 feet might be sufficient in some places, but on some places you might say
Hey,
100
Adam,
feet.
is there any way, because this came up for me as well and for other things, because I do think that we're all very complex humans, so land is also very complex. Is there a way to do it in like in an average about, like in a roundabout, anywhere from 200? So like the planning board could say it's either going to be 200 or 1,000, like between 200 and 500 for a setback or something like that.
You can leave it to the planning board's discretion to set an appropriate setback. You could give it a range of setback.
I'm just saying there
limits.
is ways to write it in
But
that
with
way,
a bare
Yeah,
minimum.
yeah,
Adam?
sure, yes. You can have a minimum and
and then leave it at their discretion.
yeah, with some guidelines.
The
you
idea,
know.
the idea of setting the criteria and possibly making it whatever the acreage is, the idea behind us making it a 5-acre lot was to quell the proliferation of potential solar farms all over Yorktown. And that, I think, is what Luciana is referring to. There would be a minimum if we went with something like a floating zone. The parcel would have to meet the minimum set of criteria,
Correct.
hypothetically. 10 acres, 200-foot setback, fully screened, however, whatever that criteria is. If somebody came in and said, well, I have a 5-acre lot. No, it doesn't meet the minimum criteria. You can't even apply for the floating zone. I think that's what Luciana's, and if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. And I think that would be the idea
That's what you have
behind
now.
setting the minimum
Yeah.
criteria.
That's what you have now.
Exactly
It's
right.
essentially what you have now.
what you have now.
The main difference between the two would be that they'd have to come back before you, and you have to have that other step of the process for basically effectively a rezone as opposed
For
to
the floating thing.
Yes, as opposed to
think
hitting
for-
the criteria and then being able to go to the planning board. But you can set the criteria now in the context of an amendment that would limit the types of properties that these things are appropriate on.
I think for me personally, I just didn't want I didn't want to have the vision. For me, I don't see Yorktown coming from the city, growing up in the Bronx, living in Manhattan. I don't also been in Mount Vernon, built beautiful pools that were run on solar panels. Literally the whole backyard was the solar panel because the pool was outside heated by it. I'm not knocking that. I think the green here and the way that we love this, preservation with the progress, there's something where I don't see my son hitting a basketball or hitting a baseball and my neighbor having a full screen of a ground mount. So for me personally, I'm going to say in my experience and what I want to see for the constituents of this town is that your neighbor on a half acre or quarter acre doesn't have 6 panels sitting in their backyard and doing it. And I think that this law, as it is already honoring that vision so that we don't have that.
Well, this law is specifically speaking about large scale,
But that's what I'm saying.
not
so
the household.
No,
So-
but I'm just saying, but
I
even
think,
so.
I think we all want the household and the rooftop.
Right.
You
The
know what I mean?
rooftop is different. I couldn't even
get
get
it,
the
but
rooftop.
We
My house
can-
didn't qualify.
But we can be responsible and we can be solar friendly and we can limit it out of residential, not in residential neighborhoods.
that's all.
We can do that. There are ways to do it, and we still can be fiscally responsible and push forward the whole green ideology, which I think there's a lot of merit to.
Wait,
I
John-
just like I said,
I'm gonna
in
ask-
solar in residential amount.
So I think there are three, maybe the first consensus that we should consider is banning it all totally on residential. Luciana, Sergio, and I
Just ground mount, not the rooftops.
we're only talking large
I know, I wanna be
scale.
clear.
Only talking large scale ground mount. That's all we're talking about. We're not talking about your neighbor who's putting up 10 panels.
I want to make sure that we know that.
So that's a first option, okay? One, we ban it, we agree to ban it all. I will go along with that. As much as it's not my first choice, I would go along with it, so we'd have 3 votes. I don't know how Ed and Pat would feel about that. We're not voting now, we're just having a
Talking.
consensus, all right?
So, like, I was with that until John had a very nice presentation and brought up a lot of other, the pros about having it, So I was for banning it on residential. Like right now, I'm not against it, but I do like your idea of the floating zone, that we have a little more control over it, and I do like it going back to the planning board. Look at, they have a lot more experience than any one of us in the whole planning, and I defer a lot of times to the planning board, to the engineering department,
Yeah.
to Abaca, to the other, for that reason.
Yes.
They have more experience. We just manage. That's all we do.
Let's see if we can move this discussion forward a little bit. I think we've all kind of identified what our concerns are.
What I'd like to do, thank you, before I'll take back control. Sarah is here from our Climate Smart Community Task Force. Why don't you come up, Sarah? I know we had a little conversation about this. John, you could stay in the vicinity because a lot of the conversation had to do with you.
Dr. John.
But Sarah's very nice, so I'm sure it was kind words. Very nice.
Well, let's not get carried away. Sarah, so I know the discussion came up in Community Smart Task Force. What did you get as the general feeling of the members of the task force on the residential end of it?
I think that every proposal, has should be evaluated on its own merits because there are differences in the scale, in the as Susan said, the topography, the number of trees that are being cut. So I think that the intention and the intent in the law currently, in terms of the prioritization and looking at, those already cleared sites, the golf course, the agricultural land, whatever, the brownfield, and then going to the natural. We all feel that way, that there needs to be a way to prioritize those more desirable projects versus the ones that, are offensive in terms of, what they look like or how many trees were cleared or whatever.
Sarah, what's the committee's stance on solar with the battery storage?
I'm not one of the more technical members
No,
of the
but just,
committee, and I can't speak for the committee per se, but it's not really something we've discussed. We've tended to talk about them
solar.
separately.
Okay.
Well, we've talked about battery energy storage systems, but I know the subject right now is the solar law.
And I realize you can't speak for the committee, on this, but just knowing the sense, and and the purpose of the committee, which has to be very pro-solar.
Right.
Would you be concerned about a total ban on all solar, on all, again, ground-mounted, large-scale?
Nobody said total ban of all solar. We said total ban of ground mount solar in residential neighborhoods.
So
Let's make sure.
Okay.
Let's make sure that we get that clear and we don't mischaracterize again, because there seems to be a recurring theme here.
We haven't talked about commercial, so you're okay with it on commercial property then?
I would have to look at that, but I'm looking at more. Right now, we're talking residential, and that's how I feel about the residential.
All right.
Of course, rooftop on commercial property. Like, look at the Curry Honda proposal that they brought in.
We're not talking about that.
That is large scale solar on rooftops. We have all our buildings that we could retrofit. There is plenty of places where we could be solar positive and be fiscally responsible as far as fiscally is the wrong word, but fiscally responsible as far as providing and producing our own solar energy without going into residential neighborhoods,
If they qualify.
large scale ground mount.
They have to qualify, and the
That's
roof has
my
to be
point.
good.
So do you think that the committee would have some concerns about a ban on residential?
We'd be concerned about a ban on
Blanket.
ground-mounted solar,
Yeah.
certainly, because there's a place for that. But we also talk a lot about the prioritization of the rooftops, carports, things like that. But I also understand that there's a difference in cost in terms of the solar developers. It's much less expensive for them to put in ground-mounted solar than to do something like a carport, which is going to require construction, in addition to the panels.
Well, some sites don't lend themselves to carports.
Right.
Foothill was not a suitable thing for a carport.
Right, of course.
So,
Yep.
and we do have separate the regulations in our code specifically are ground mounted. So
Yep,
that's
that's
what
right.
we're talking about. Nobody is questioning the value of rooftop, right?
But there is another problem even with rooftop, because if it's an older structure and the type of roof and how you mount it, that it may not be feasible. The roof might not be able to handle it, and you
It poses issues with firefighters.
right. So you get a little bit hamstrung if you say we're just going to do rooftop, because not all rooftops are really.
Because the YCC building is made
Well,
of Duraflex, you can't
At
put
this
it on.
point, I haven't delved into the land use aspects of rooftops. Okay, obviously, the owner of the building has to determine whether the roof can take those panels. That's a separate issue from a land use point of view. We don't want to look at rooftop.
Right, but Susan,
rooftop piece.
I'm not a big fan of the panels. I've said that before. I know Tommy and I had these conversations quite a bit, and one of the issues that you find out with the ground mount and with solar in general is that we are trying to alleviate what could be an energy crisis in New York State. Now, hopefully, with some of the regulations lifting, we have some things happen, but we have people who are fighting against natural gas lines. We have people who are fighting against solar because of trees. We have people that are fighting against fossil fuel and oil. We had people fight against nuclear to the point where we had our nuclear power plant in the area shut down. So we're running out of options, and I hate to be handcuffed. I hate to be pushed into a situation, but I don't want to be here answering questions that courtesy to the floor. Why does my power go out every other day? In the summertime when my husband or wife is on oxygen and we need our air conditioning. And that's, I've always said, I try to look down the road and see where we are. So I want to look at the rooftop options. I want to look at our ground mount options, because we have legislation that's pushed on us that may not be advantageous to us.
And I also want to just name, I just want to name like Mount Pleasant put it on their pool, where their pool and their parks and recs are. They did a beautiful job over that. I was against having that at Grant Knolls. I feel like that place should have been this open. And I am the liaison to Parks and Rec, so Jimmy will tell you they weren't very happy with me. I didn't like it there. But I also then, with Matt, explored doing all of our town lots, the police department, here. And I'm going to say this again. My Con Ed and ISIC bills are not always very pretty. My neighbor has solar. I am not able to get solar. I had 3 companies come out and say, you don't get enough sun. I'm like, my roof is brand new. You don't get enough sun. The guy that came here said, we didn't get enough sun. I ended up calling Tompkins, got someone else, because I thought lots like this would be great. Somebody can park in a park and ride, and their car's not snowed in. I also, because I come from landscape architecture and pools, people build canopies that have almost like a tint. They're actually solar panels, and they heat their pools. And in Rye, I was able to build pergolas with solar panels on top, and they look beautiful in their own private yards in the back. And they were able to run the energy into their pools, because you would get a hydro pump, which was half a heat pump, half gas, so it would work together. There's a lot of ways to go green. I think that our climate support, you guys are doing a great job with researching that stuff, but we have other lots in our town that I think would be good. And then if they can toss in paving them, and he doesn't have to deal with all the snow on him because they're on the top of the roof, it could be beneficial.
All right, but again, right now we're talking about ground mounted. So we have to focus on ground mounted. The town, among our town board members, we have been circulating a draft RFP for rooftops on town buildings. All right, that's a separate issue. Okay, let's focus on ground mounted.
It is, but it's not. For the law, it's not, and that's why we need to focus on that. But I don't want you to lose sight over the fact that we need to look globally. We can't just look at the one without taking into effect the effects on the other. And that was where a lot of the conversation was there.
And to your concern about we have to look globally and the energy needs, which is why my priority would be to have the floating zone, which leaves the door open to possible residential.
You just said you would vote against solar altogether, so that's why I'm.
It's not my first choice. My first choice, and I think the soundest choice from a land use perspective to protect the town and to protect our neighborhoods, okay, our residential neighborhoods, which is the prime concern that Luciana and Sergio have, and that's the prime concern for me. But it also leaves the door open for a ground-mounted facility in an appropriate location, and the town board, which should control zoning issues and land use issues, makes that determination and then hands it over to the planning board for the very specific, as you say, they have the expertise to do the very specific nitty-gritty, detail-oriented site plan review. Once we say, yeah, that's an appropriate use.
Yeah, so Adam, does our law right now not do that?
What's that?
The law right now, as I read it, has certain criteria, and then it comes here, and then we vet it to see if it has it.
No, you don't vet it. No.
No.
It goes to the
We don't
planning
vet it,
We don't look at it
Goes
at all.
directly.
No, but I'm saying we vetted it already by giving them the criteria.
But the criteria are so loose and so vague that the planning board, it doesn't really control it, because the planning board has no, if they can meet the minimum criteria, for example, they could say, yeah, go cut down 500 trees. Okay, they could say that.
Would you say that? I don't think you would say that.
Yeah,
No.
you could. Yeah, you
Well,
can't.
depending on the size of the field.
There's the criteria, just like you're talking about, having criteria. So they have their criteria. If it doesn't meet it, then you can't do it. The criteria is minimums, and the planning board can increase those if they care to. And
There's nothing in the current law
Oh.
that says you have to take into consideration the benefits and weigh the benefits of solar versus the benefits of keeping those 500 trees.
but
There's nothing
that,
in the law that
as
says
we've
that.
discussed before, there is no criteria by which to judge that against. I know you sent over some things about the 13% of this and so on and so forth, but that's not really criteria to balance against it. The criteria that we have to do is the carbon sequestration calculation, which is which is a formula. It comes out with numbers, which I described at the last time I spoke. What you can't do, what you have to be careful of, is that you're going to be making decisions that are fair for one guy but not fair for the next guy. And you can't do it you're going to have to set out criteria. And I just don't think that, as you've discussed and described, that you're going to sort of make an evaluation, and 500 trees might be too much, 499 is going to be okay, but another guy down the road, because he has a little extra 10%, that the 500 is going to be okay. You're going to run into trouble. I just don't think it works like that. Not to mention all of the other things that I talked about, that your trees in this town on the larger lots are subject and under development pressure 24 hours a day, always. And there will be development on all those properties. If, for instance, if you try to limit it to the 8 or 10 farms that we have, why is a guy that has 40 acres with nothing on it, is he barred from trying to use that use? Why is that fair? And why does it help anything, really? Because we're talking about clean energy. And what's wrong with clean energy? I understand how people feel about trees, and it's an emotional reaction that I think is happening here that we're hearing about. But I find a lot of the discussion somewhat disorganized. I really do.
The discussion is, granted, disorganized because it's going all over the place in terms of rooftop, ground-mounted, large scale, small scale, and it does need some focus.
And by the way, three I think of the farms, of the 8 or 10 farms that we have already opted into it. Every single one has had to take down trees, so it's not this open pasture land. We have a couple of farms that produce their products come from trees, so I don't think they're going to avail themselves of solar. So it's extremely limiting, and maybe that's what you want, but it's extremely limiting for what you're proposing, I think, if you don't think it out well enough. And I don't think it achieves what is in your intent, which I think you spent a lot of time producing, that you want to not get into clean energy business, but promote clean energy. Right now, I think you're really severely restricting it. And, I just find some of this stuff that we're talking about not really hitting the mark.
But
I see where it comes from.
Energy.
I see where it comes from.
We can promote clean energy. Everybody keeps conflating the fact that, I don't want it in residential neighborhoods to, we're not promoting clean energy. And I've said it numerous times that there are other ways that we can promote clean energy. I think I used fiscally responsible with solar. I think I used that several times. So I'll change my phrase to, we can promote clean energy in other ways other than sticking some thing next in a residential neighborhood. And I've seen it. I've gone up north.
We do it better than up north.
In Geneseo, I go there and I look at these huge solar farms. You got a house, this huge solar farm that's a mess. It just looks like black panels with weeds, right? And then because you know what? They come in, they put it in, they make it look nice, and then they're gone. And then they're gone. I don't want that in our neighborhoods. I'm sorry.
Upstate does it. Our law came after a lot of the upstate ones, and we learned from them because I drove by some of them myself. And they can look really terrible. They look terrible when you see them. I agree with that.
All right.
But our law has criteria that they have to be screened properly, which all of the ones that are being put in are doing. The Foothill one does not have its screening installed yet because it missed the season. So when you see that because nothing's been planted there yet. The Foothill one you see from certain vantage points, but that screening is not mature yet.
You're always going to see them. I don't care how mature it comes.
You may always see certain aspects of them, yes.
And that's okay. This whole concept of being fully screened is a myth because just like Susan said, the topography.
It is a myth.
You could be up on a hill and looking down. You're going to see them.
I wouldn't say it's a myth, but it's impractical to believe that everything can be 100% fully screened from everywhere.
It's not going to be invisible.
Okay.
I will say I saw a picture of a solar field in North Carolina today that was screened with mature pine trees.
Mm-hmm.
And other than the fact that, to me, or evergreens, I'm sorry.
Well, the
Other
arborvitae's.
than the fact that the evergreens looked a little out of place down south, you couldn't see that there was a solar farm there.
Well,
You
that's
couldn't
the,
see.
that's the hope. That's the
Right.
hope.
So,
That's the goal.
And who took the pretty picture? The developer?
it was someone who took a picture from the neighborhood that he lived in.
So, Sarah, a quick question for you, Sarah.
Conversation.
Do you guys analyze when do Yorktown residents get that? Because I asked a question to another solar developer that has a project going on. He's like, oh, the Yorktown gets the benefit right away. Well, not really. You know, like from what I found out is that it goes into the grid, and then after we get, I'm going to make up a number, but 30 megawatts. After we get the 30 megawatts, then we could start. It'll start hitting our things because it goes to the closest, reactor or whatever it is. So, like, do you guys analyze that, or because you put those solar panels in, goes out to the grid. Whatever company it is, theoretically, it lowers everybody's thing.
Actually, Patrick, I think that's a different animal, which would be community solar.
Right, I was going to say.
So some of these projects are actually private solar, where the people who are coming in are being pursued by the landowner in order to make their land viable. So the choices, and as our construction costs rise higher and higher, because that's similar to, I want to say, Dell Avenue. Odell's in Yonkers. I keep making that confusion there. Like the Dell Avenue solar farm, they've been before the board probably about 20 years now on the different. The last version was, I think Michael was in, and it was like a senior living facility there, or senior
my time.
housing. So they've been here many times.
Jacobs Road. I asked the guys point blank. He's just like, yeah, no, pretty much on the sales pitch. It goes right to Yorktown residents.
No.
Let me finish,
Sorry,
Susan, please.
sorry about that. It's so wrong.
It goes right to Yorktown residents. No, it doesn't. It comes to Yorktown residents 30 years from now, when New York State has fulfilled their solar requirements of 30 megawatts. So it doesn't hit Yorktown residents forever, and and you're basically putting a small business in someone's backyard. That's why originally, like I said before, I was against residential, but John put a very good presentation on all the benefits of it. So I'm torn between both sides, but I just wanted to see if you guys analyze, when do the residents of Yorktown get any benefit out of this?
Yeah, and we have talked a bit about the resilience, right? And that some of these sites can become microgrids. And, we talked a bit about the combination of the panels with the battery storage. And again, to the extent that you can store that energy in the community, then it's available to go back into the grid in our community, right? And community solar is a different animal as well, right? That's where residents are subscribing into whatever the community solar project is. But the more solar generation we have, again, the more resilience we have to be able to smooth out these peak demand periods.
I was just asking, because I asked the gentleman from the Jacobs Farm one, and he's like, the first time we talked to him, he's like, yeah, no, the energy is right back in Yorktown, Then, a month later, it's like, nah, it goes to the grid, and, when New York, gets their fair share, then when it's full, then it doesn't have to transport as far, and that's when Yorktown residents get it. So I just wondering, like, rooftop solar, the person gets it immediately. Ground mounted, it goes to the grid, and they might lower the cost by a penny, or it might lower it by $1. Who knows? But we don't have any control over what that price is, and we're just giving up the land, giving up the trees.
So
I'm torn between both of it. I'm just trying to.
So you're asking about the WIFM. What's in it for me? Meaning the town.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
but-
Yes.
for the
right.
residents.
No, absolutely. So
100%.
So, it's funny because I had a conversation with one of the solar representatives as well as with our assessor to see, what benefits do we get. So a lot of times they put pilot agreements into effect. And, it's probably something we need to look at because I don't think the pilot agreements are actually beneficial per se with with what we would get even on the unimproved land tax-wise. So, but the conversation with the gentleman trying to do the solar, he was like, "No, I understand that, and we could look at some different things, like if it's fire apparatus to help it with some of the fires and like dealing with outdoor fires if needed. If it's even if we're losing land that may have been subdeveloped into houses, maybe something into the recreational fees for the town or some type of give back to the town." And look, I don't think they're going to give us $22 billion, but they did seem open to having that conversation. So I do have Gary looking into that a little more. But yeah, but the benefit right now for the town, and this is where we got off a little bit because there are all the different types of solar. But the main thing is we may be more reliant on solar than we would like to be, the way the legislature pushes down on us from Albany. There are a lot of things that are sort of unfunded mandates that we get, but there are also a lot of things that affect our everyday life that come down that, unfortunately, in our community, we don't have much say. And, what works for Geneseo might not work for Yorktown. What works for Albany doesn't work for Yorktown. What works for Manhattan doesn't work for Yorktown. And, whoever's running that show up there, that, like right now, Governor Hochul from Buffalo area. So, you know what? Buffalo, where we lost our nuclear plant, they opened one. Surprise, surprise. So, there are a lot of issues that unfortunately we don't have control of per se, but we have to take into account as we look down the road. Because, like I said, I think about it all the time. Whenever the power goes out, any of our seniors on an oxygen machine, people in the heat with the AC. We open up a cooling center in the summertime, but what if the person can't get there? What if it's too late? So there are a lot of what ifs in this, and I think we need to be very cognizant of looking down.
So just going over, I know what you said in Geneseo and stuff, but we did receive an email, and I'll tell you about the surrounding areas that we live in. In the town of Greenburgh, large-scale ground-mount solar panels are only permitted in specified non-residential zoning districts and not in residential districts. That's Greenburgh. The town of Cortland, ground-mounted solar panels are prohibited in almost all residential districts. In the town of North Castle, large-scale solar panels are only allowed in non-residential districts. The city of White Plains takes a different approach, he goes on to say, and completely bans solar panel farms and only permits them on buildings and solar canopies. The town village of Harrison limits large-scale solar facilities to only 2 residential districts, and in those districts, let me see, be permitted a special exception. There's a special exception, and there's a minimum lot size of 25 acres. So you got Harrison, White Plains, North Castle, Cortland, and Greenburgh. Do these places sound familiar to you guys?
What was Cortland?
Cortland, in the town of Cortland, ground-mounted solar panels are prohibited in almost all residential districts. Almost all, okay? Which, what did I say? I said, yeah, I'd like to see them on our farms if that's possible. Those are residential districts. So that would mean that we would be banning, with me, we would be permitting them in almost, we would be banning them in almost all residential districts. We would technically be doing the same thing. And then you have Ossining, and Ossining, to Susan's point, Ossining has the floating zone. I want to be fair. However, and with those two residential districts, the town village of Harrison further essentially bans ground-mounted solar in undeveloped, vegetated, and wooded areas. So now we're talking
It
about
doesn't
these things.
ban it. I think it should be avoided, I think is the language in Harrison.
So real quick,
So,
Sarah.
There's
I
no
mean,
point
It should
I
be
mean,
avoided, it's not banned.
I'm not proposing
Unless
something.
Holstead Avenue's gonna hold
I'm,
it.
I'm not proposing something that's like this, like, oh my God, he's against solar, and that's not what this is.
You want
because
us all to freeze, sir.
there is there is a way that we could be responsible and promote clean energy. I got that right? Did I get it right? All right, I got it right. And promote clean energy, without, being destructive to our residential neighborhoods. All right? And that's all I'm saying. And I think there's a way to do it. And I think there's a way that we could be responsible about it. And every town around us is doing the same thing. So, or something pretty close to it.
So quick question.
ahead,
Just
Sarah.
one quick one, Susan. To John and Sarah. Can, if you do a battery energy storage unit, can that be directed to local residents, or is that they're in control of it and it goes back to the grid, or most of those strictly for the land use building, or we'll call
Deposit
it?
of the energy.
I mean, it's stored locally, and if it's going to go back into the grid, it's going to go back into the grid locally, right? So if there's a demand locally, then that's giving that capacity locally. I mean, it could go anywhere in the grid, but it's just practical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but when someone says, and I understand what you're saying, but when somebody says, oh, it's going to go in locally, it's like we're saying Yorktown has its own specific local grid that only serves Yorktown, and that's just not the way it is, And so, these, I understand what you're saying, but the reality of it is, it goes into the grid, and who knows where it goes from there.
It probably goes, it's like water pressure. It's going to go to the closest place that it's being asked to go.
Right.
Right, so it's not going to travel 30 miles down to, who's banning it? White Plains? It's not going to travel down to White Plains.
Nobody said it would.
No, you just said who knows where it goes. Most likely, it's going to go close to where it's being produced. It's not going to be traveling, it's not going to be
10 miles,
going to
15
transmission.
miles, 20 miles, 25 miles.
Listen,
We've said not 30, so
honestly, I don't
what
think you
is
can
it?
follow the exact electrons, let's say. But you know what? The electricity's going to go up. There's going to be some demand nearby. When someone turns on a light switch, the electricity's going to flow to that open valve. That's how it works.
I'd like to see if we can, we've talked about this probably for more than an hour. I'd like to see if we can bring it to some kind of consensus on two basic points.
How about
Either
the
an
4 points?
Either an all-out ban on residential or or a floating zone as an option. To pick
That's-
up on what you said.
Susan, that's not
No,
the
wait,
only.
there's
No,
just a sec-
no,
all right,
no, no.
okay, I want to
Susan,
read
Susan, no.
something. I want to read something.
You're really going to read more literature into
No,
the meeting.
no, I want to
But here's the
follow
thing.
up on what
Those are
Sergio was-
not the only two choices, because the choice is to just update the current law, which is what we were doing.
Oh, all right,
And
okay.
I don't want to say we have to change the wheel, because it might be that we come back around and at the end say, you know what, this is where we need, let's just tighten up what we have.
I grant you that. So there are three options. You ban it on all residential.
Everyone's got it.
Okay.
What did you want to read in?
Okay. Sergio, from the memo that you were reading, which outlined the different municipalities that ban residential.
I bet there's more, but yes.
Yeah, obviously, the person who did this just put some together. The one other comment he made, which I'd like to add, is when he talks about the floating zones, is the obvious advantage of floating zones is that the town can define the criteria it will use when determining where industrial solar would be appropriate. But the town does not have to find all the places where such exists at this time. That's the key. We don't deal with it at this.
What town are you reading? I'm sorry.
This
That
is
sounds like
the
Austin.
floating zone.
Oh.
This is just the concept of the floating zone. Such an approach benefits applicants as explicitly outlined criteria will provide applicants with an understanding of how the town board will make its decisions. So the property owner knows in advance, yeah, I think I'm going to meet the criteria, I think I'm not going to meet the criteria, I'm not going to waste my time. It also permits the town to directly consider the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan when making its decisions on rezonings that permit industrial solar. Again, it gives the power to the town board to decide land use zoning for the town, and it leaves the door open for solar where it's ground-mounted solar where it's appropriate. And then the planning board makes the ultimate decision. So I think let's have some consensus. The moratorium ends March 31st. We have to decide as a board what we want to do, which option. Amend the current law with and tinker with the size of the lot, the acreage, how it's screened. That's one option. Banning all residential is another. Floating zone is another. And then we haven't really talked about commercial as another option. So I think we have to decide what we want and then tell Adam and John to write the appropriate
That's
law.
why we're here. So back
But we've
back
had
to the
enough of the
question I
discussion.
started. Well, you know what, Susan? People want to say something. I give you the courtesy. I give Patrick the courtesy. I give Sergio the courtesy. I give Luciano the courtesy. And also Sarah puts in a lot of time on this, as did John. They deserve that.
Yeah.
And so please don't say, well, we should move it because you don't want to hear them anymore.
I think we've gone through all of the issues. I
Well,
don't know that there are any other issues that we haven't discussed.
Apparently not, because there was still conversation about it.
All right.
So I guess the question I have for the board is, do we see a way forward, or is it a ban? So Susan, you told me before you see a way forward.
My first choice is a floating zone. I think it solves the solar issue. It addresses your issue about this need for solar going forward, okay? And it protects our neighborhoods. It protects the residential neighborhoods, which I think we are all concerned about.
Okay, and I will tell you, just for the rest of the board too, I prefer your first choice is your choice, because that's the way you feel about it. So as we get to this, let me know, this is my first choice, and move on. I don't want it, it shouldn't be, you know what, I'll do this, I'll do that, that's politics. I want a decision and know where we're going. Patrick?
So, I'm very torn. I'm just afraid of the battery storage. It's like a mini business sitting in someone's backyard.
We could write the battery storage out.
That's separate, yeah.
So it doesn't have to be there. I've talked to solar guys, and they say, no, look, we understand, and actually that's going to be county legislated soon as well. So I wouldn't worry too much about the battery storage per se. We could do home rule on that, and we could say we don't want it, and I'm with you on that. If you have but do you see a way for solar working in a residential neighborhood based on the criteria?
I think if we define the criteria, I do see some moving forward.
Great.
Yes.
All
Yeah,
right.
I mean, I just want to give John a little kudos. His presentation a couple weeks ago
He's the doctor.
opened my eyes, and he enlightened me on it. So I think that we can get some. My take is we can get something.
Okay. Sergio?
Does anybody want to answer for me on how I really feel about this?
So you want to ban it in residential?
I say,
Commercial.
I say, yes. I'm going to go back to my original comment. I'd like to keep the farms in play, and we could specify what they are, and we could pick out. We may even be able to pick out certain properties, like establish the areas that we agree on that it could be possible. For me, not in residential zones, but yes on farms. So it would be mostly no on residential zones, except the.
So you
7
see a
farms.
way through it? Thank
I
you.
see, of course, I see a way through it, but that
Luciana?
would be my criteria.
I see the way through holding that there's a limit to the amount of acres
Okay.
that the land has.
Well, that comes into the next question to work on. Do we want to set criteria that are heavy
What about
up
yours?
front?
Are you
You
for
know,
it?
I have 4 votes that are saying move forward with this. So
Move forward
and-
which way?
Well, move forward with the conversation and go through the choices. I'm going to take it logically. I'm a deciding vote anyway. So if you're 2-2 on something, then I'll give you my opinion. So now the question is, do we look at a floating zone? Do we look at a strictly defined zone? Do we look at a zone that has a set of criteria for first, but hey, if it's in this residential zone, we're fine with it, on a mountain or whatever. That's up to you guys. So Susan, I assume you like the floating zone and want to stay in that.
I think it gives us the most flexibility in deciding what is appropriate for our town.
Okay. Patrick?
I think we could define very well, and I do like the floating zone idea that we have the opportunity to take each case by case thing. So, but and it's very stringent, and I would like to put the guardrails on that.
So put the guardrails on before they even get to
Yeah,
that.
the criteria.
Tighten that up so
Yeah.
tight so when it does go back to planning with the floating zone, we'll call it, John has a very good idea of what our intent is.
Okay. Sergio?
I say strictly defined zones, because when we went from 2 acres to 5 acres, we were pleasantly surprised. I would say, for me, unpleasantly surprised about the amount of parcels that were still available. And so I don't know if we could ever fully vet what the criteria is going to be and what properties are actually going to be in play. So I think if we strictly define the properties that may be in play based on the criteria, right, and say no in residential zones, but we strictly define the parcels ahead of time. So this way, there's no surprise when we find a piece of property. Who knows every inch of Yorktown? I mean, I don't. I wish I did, but I don't. So how do I know some property is going to pop up that's going to be contrary to what I would say? I don't want it there. So I would say we could go over and we could say this property, that property. We could set the floating zone, so to speak, ahead of time, and I'll just leave it up to some. You know what I mean?
Then you can just do a zone,
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
just overlay.
I think that
Adam, what is the, sorry, Luciano. What is, if we're saying, hey, we're going to pick this over that, how challengeable is that?
I'm not following.
So say we say, you know what, we like Charlie's property, we like Ann's property, we like Joanne's property, we don't like Brian's property. So these three are going to be in there. That one isn't going to be, I don't like Jay's property, but I like Mark's property.
You mean in the context of a float?
In context of setting a law that actually defines the properties that are good for.
No, that I don't love. That I wouldn't recommend.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
But what if it is just exactly that? Like, it has to be a minimum of 5 acres.
Well, we are.
That's what we have now.
And that's
It's
it.
2 acres.
It's a
You
minimum
can change it to
5 acres,
5, or
then-
maybe it's 5 now.
Or maybe the number goes up on that. a little bit.
From what I heard from, like, and I was fine with 10 acres. I was fine with 7 acres, but I'm saying, you just
Well,
said, as long as it says minimum, he can say that 5 acres doesn't justify it because I can't fit in screening, or I can't prevent the water, or it's too close to the road, or this is an easement for
we
Con
could
Ed.
we could back into.
I mean, there are factors, guys, that like.
You can back into this by, I suspect, and I don't think this is that much work, although John can correct me if I'm wrong. If you come up with criteria, I think the planning department can analyze the parcels probably and tell you how many would be eligible for a project under a specific set of criteria. I don't think that's that Herculean a task, although maybe I'm wrong about that.
No,
Right, and then we could define those properties based on
No,
the criteria and put it in the law.
No,
you also have to
no,
define them with
you
whether
define-
they're close enough to the infrastructure
Yeah.
to be viable, which is going to further reduce it more than the 5 or 10 acre limit. So you already have a limited amount that are attractive to be used as solar farms.
Right, but you don't define the
Because of that.
properties. You just define the criteria, and it's going to have a practical impact.
I would specify the properties.
Well, that's
I'd say, for example, I'd give you 7 properties right now. The seven farms. It's
They
a
would all have
recurring
something
theme
in
with me.
common.
I'm not gonna letting it go.
Well, what John brought up as a point before, that immediately eliminates the maple syrup farm, or they say.
And
you
if
know
it
what?
does, it does.
Well, no, or they say, gee, I'll get more money out of this, and I'm going to do this, or someone comes in and we lose what is really a great thing for our town. It eliminates Wilkins Fruit Farm. So there's two right off of the plate.
Okay.
And then again, I'll move back to the Wilkins family and the Pratt family. They retire, and now that farm's up for sale, and someone comes in and they buy it, and they could either go for a subdivision or they want to go for a big solar field right in the middle up there in that neighborhood, and we lose a great natural resource that we have, and we lose all of the people
Those
coming
donuts
up.
are awesome.
What happens if it's
Especially the chocolate dip
what
one.
happens if the scenario where we have two farms that put solar on there, so this way they could stay as farms?
Right, but I don't.
But you're ensuring their survival. And we could set criteria on the specified properties. You'd still have to I wouldn't specify a property and say, okay, where my law, right? We're banning it in residential, all residential except property A, B, and C. Hey, do whatever you guys want. You know, if you want to go right to the property line, don't even worry about it. There would still be criteria that they would have, that we would set on top of the properties that are permissible. There would still be criteria. It's not like, hey, it's a free for all. Do whatever you want. You want to put a solar panel right on the edge of the street? Go ahead. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's like, hey,
No,
we would still set criteria.
I understand.
Do you have
that.
to keep the farm?
That would be one of the criteria.
So how would you sell your farm when your descendants no longer want to work farms?
So then we could work that out. We could talk about that, and
There you go.
and we're flushing it out.
There's the mess. I mean,
It's not a mess. It's not a mess. What's a mess
It gets
is the
a
way
little
we're
messy.
doing things now. That's what a mess is. That's why putting them in putting solar farms in residential neighborhoods, that's the mess. I'm sorry. And they are not pretty. They do not belong there. And if we don't go with the farm stuff, that's fine. I'm just thinking that you don't want to because the only reason why I bring it up is because the farms just happen to be in a residential zone, and a lot of farms. And the only reason why I bring it up again is two of the farms already have taken advantage of being able to do solar on their property to ensure their own survival. Now, the law is never clear cut, no matter how well it's defined. There are always things and avenues that you may not
Loopholes.
you may not see. But we could look at that once we figure out what path we're going to go down. Then we proceed to flush out, the details. Of course, with your help, and other people as well, and a public hearing where we listen to the public, and maybe they have some ideas that I'm not thinking about.
So is it only a working farm? Because we have farms that are overgrown now that are owned by people. The Hill Farm was one. What's one at the end of, to the right of Jefferson Village, at the end of Quinlan? That's a farm also there, correct?
Oh,
End of
Solomon's Farm.
Quinlan Solomon Farm?
Solomon Farm.
Yeah,
Town
that's-
owns that.
We own that.
Town owns
Okay,
that.
so we own that now. And then you have, St. Pat's was an egg farm. You have the brothers who had the egg farm over on Quinlan.
Yeah, that has open,
Not Quinlan,
well, on
Gomer.
Gomer, that has open land that was,
Right.
Which
could be considered.
creates the problem of
those, right, is, yes, you could define, but is it only working farm? Because that's.
Well, that's something that would have to be flushed out. We're not creating the law right now. We're trying to figure out what path we
Right,
can
but
all agree on and go forward. Then we could flush out those questions.
what
Right.
problem, what,
That's what happens. That's next level. That's not right now. So
So
I don't think
So I have floating, Patrick, floating or definitive setup in the law?
I like to tighten up the criteria, and I'm not opposed with the floating.
All right, so you go either way. Sergio? You
I
want
want
strict criteria, no?
Now, floating would be in residential?
Yes, floating would be any project comes before us, we look at it, maybe we don't do the full-blown, like, we're not gonna look at, all of the stuff that planning will go through with like, water retention and all that, but we're gonna look at maybe we look at just the.
Screening.
The screening, the things, hey, we want to see balloon tests, we want to see what you're looking at. And then we're able to say, all right, we're going to punt to you, and you do your due diligence on all of the other issues.
To be clear, you're going to have to go through a full seeker process.
Yeah, it's a type 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Typically. Well, I just want to make that clear. It's not, you got to go through a full, just like you did with a normal reason. It's
So it
effectively
is
a
full
rezone.
secret, so
Yeah.
that was sort of my question
A-
earlier.
And the,
With a floating zone?
Yeah.
and the floating zone could say that we're only allowing solar in residential zones subject to these criteria, or you could say, I'm allowing it in all zones. So if you want to leave the door open for commercial, again, with the criteria.
Well,
So-
you brought up the point before, and I
That's
think
an
you're right,
option.
that commercially, we don't have the ground space, and I mentioned that as well. I don't really see, the only thing that would work in the commercial would be solar canopies, which are a little different than ground-mounted solar. So,
Well, we have a few vacant commercially zoned properties. I'm thinking, the State Farm land on Route 202. I was thinking about the,
I don't know if we would want to blind everyone on the other side of 202. with
I'm
these
just
maps.
saying, I can't think of all of the old recycling facility thing, where we
That-
said no
that-
to recycling.
Right, that's in light industrial.
That's
yeah.
a light industrial. I'm not saying I know that that's a good site, but I'm just saying I don't have any firm feelings about commercial because we're really talking about very, very few commercial sites, okay? But if there is concern on the board, then when the floating zone is written with all its criteria, you could decide that at that point. And then some of the criteria could involve, if you want to say we're going to allow it in commercial, then the criteria could somehow deal with not losing a potentially viable for commercial development
so
site.
You're saying basically on in the floating zone description to include residential and commercial.
I'm not sure.
just asking.
I'm open to that.
Okay, I'm just
The
asking.
key
But
area of
Susan,
this
I
board
will
is
say, you never
residential.
know the viability, so that one, the old recycling idea.
just wrote that
wa-
out.
was an idea, not a good one, but before that, there was that property is actually, if someone wanted to do the site work, good for a hotel, correct?
Are
Joe?
you suggesting
I-
allowing ground-mounted as a single main use in commercial zones?
I'm leaving it open. I haven't.
I completely think that should not be allowed, and it's not allowed now.
Okay, that's almost like
Why
a
shouldn't it
secondary
be allowed?
issue. I don't know.
We're
Well-
promoting green energy, right? Or whatever.
Well, we spend a lot of our lives in the commercial areas in our towns, right?
Yeah.
And we want them to look nice,
Yeah.
free. We spend time
You're
on
making a good
landscaping.
argument for me.
No. But so, how about the Walgreens site? Would you want to see ground mount solar there?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
I don't want to see ground mount solar.
How about on the 8 acres next to it? What about State Land Corp up that whole slope? Do you want to see it there? I mean, I don't think you want to see them in the commercial zones, in particular
I
in the
agree.
commercial zones.
All right, so
Embedding them deeper away, I think, is more achievable.
so what I'm saying to the board is if there's enough support for a floating zone concept, it could be limited to, you could say it's strictly for residential, or you can leave the door open for commercial. I think we
I
can
don't
have
think
that
we do.
discussion, or we could just ban it on commercial.
There's too many open doors for me, to be quite honest.
Lou?
The idea
I think
is
we
the
should- I think-
criteria. The criteria is the key aspect of
Luciano was going
Right.
to answer me. Thank you. Lou?
I think there are many ways to go green, and we're talking about large mount, and I don't want to see them. So I think that our law should have very clean-cut criteria in it to even entertain the game, and then it should go to the planning board, who's fully vetting, as he mentioned, 3 or 4, let's say, a year, maybe 2 make it, maybe 1, maybe none, right? After the vetting, and we go from there. I think keeping things floating and doing it, how many more nights of this, whether it's this board that exists or another board, is it gonna be all of this? I think sometimes we give too much rope, and sometimes we don't give enough rope, and I don't like it. It's not that I don't want to do the work and vet each property. I don't like it, and I like the idea that we can find other ways to create that same kind of resource. That's how I feel.
And the other $1 million question is, is the new law retroactive? But that's a whole other conversation. Let's get to a point where
That's
we're making a
that's
law.
a legal question.
I believe
think.
anybody who's done the work already and is.
Adam.
Let's get to the,
My opinion.
let's get through this
They-
before
you
we
should-
even
I don't
tackle
think you
that.
should. I'm a big. That was grandfathered in. Like, you know those buildings that are like no more dogs, and there's like 8 dogs on the floor, and I'm like, sorry, that was grandfathered in. They've been living here when it was rent stabilized.
Adam, is it legal to say someone who's in the process that you grandfather change the law? I know we have certain.
Unless
We change zoning.
we have
all
to
the
look
time.
at, I'd have to look at all the projects, but as I understand it, there's no one so far along. Like, there's no one that's gotten a permit that hasn't built. I don't think.
Didn't we say that
If
the
you-
people, didn't we, I thought we said the
They'll have-
people that are moving forward, they're moving forward at their own risk.
Yes.
Yes, we
Yes, and there are projects that have been in there for some
And
time.
And I think we grandfathered them.
No, at their own risk.
Nobody's grandfathered into having one of these. As
The
far as
ones
I
that
can
had
tell.
building, I thought we said the ones that had building permits.
Yeah, that was building permits, yeah.
If
Yes,
you have
they
a building,
they had the building permit. They're able to move forward with it.
oh, you mean in the moratorium?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but that's a
Colangelo
separate-
and
that-
Dell,
No, I
which
know
are the
that.
I'm
two-
answering a
that.
separate
I know
question.
that. I know.
I'm answering a separate question.
I'm
I
talking
thought the
about
question
anybody
was.
who's putting their boots on the grounds and their shovels in there, and they've been in front of the planning board and they got questioned. I mean, at this point,
they- Jacob Road, Colangelo has gone at its own risk.
Yes.
And so anything that we pass, regardless of what it is, they're going to be subject to, and they know that, and they knew that when they decided to proceed.
You want to talk about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's right. Right now, it just seems like I have 3 people who want strict criteria, and 1.5 or 2.5 want strict criteria, and 1.5 that are saying, but I can live with the floating zone.
The floating zone includes strict criteria.
No, I understand that, but I think that, what Luciana's point sort of echoed mine earlier, is how many layers do we add? How many hours of the debate, where we sometimes will get so off, like today, we're talking about large-scale solar energy, but we had to talk about the advantages of all types of solar. I don't think it was worthless conversation, but it definitely added
Time.
an hour onto this conversation. So that's going to happen, as Luciana pointed out, with every board that has to have this conversation, because when we start looking at the floating zone, it's going to be, but, we need to look at A, B, C, D, E down the line, and hopefully those future boards are looking at the future of Yorktown and where we are, and maybe things change. Maybe we find fusion energy all of a sudden, and all of this drops off the face of the map, and then everyone's trying to get
1.21 gigawatts.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
look like him a little. We
you
went
go.
over this already.
So that's where I sit with this. I just don't want this to. If we have the professionals who could handle it, I don't think that it should be a wrestling match every time it comes to the town board, and that's pretty much where it's going to be. So I would be more in favor of setting up a strict criteria. I would be more than amenable to expanding the size. I do think that every lot is different in the screening. I would like a minimum. I think right now we're at 50 or 100, John, for our minimum. 100?
100.
So I would not want to go below that 100, but I would say that the planning board, based on balloon tests and site tests, should be able to say, no, you know what, you need to be back another 100 feet, and give them that criteria. I know we have liaisons who will serve throughout time on the planning board, and they could bring that back to the town, and we could do a memo saying, hey, we'd like you to look at this because we don't think it's enough, or we think it's too much. That's fine, but I just think that we could set a criteria without literally having a wrestling match all the time, because we've had 5 different opinions, on this running through and mixing up and coming back around.
So then why don't we put together our issues
Well,
and
that's
tighten it up and go
Sure.
first iteration, in the next couple days or so, and then just start.
Well, I
at
think we
least
could.
it's a
I think
starting
we
point.
could throw a couple things out to Adam because we do have an existing law, and I think that it will be a little bit of a compromise on some of the things because I know Sergio does not like the idea of giving the discretion to the planning board. He just would rather push it back, and I understand his opinion on that. I just think that
Well, it's that wrestling match thing then.
yeah.
Then you're gonna have a developer that comes in and
And
they
this
could
is-
always go for a variance in the appropriate place, right? Zone.
Yeah, I think that you're just passing the buck, and you're not going to solve the problem when it gets to the planning board by tightening up some criteria, because then you're going to argue fully screened or partially screened or screening to a reasonable amount.
Well,
and then that's-
we need to strengthen that definition, and I think that, I think you're absolutely right. There's no way to fully screen, especially in the beginning.
That's a myth.
There has to be a set timeline criteria, which all of these projects have had, and none of them have gotten to the progression yet. Some of them haven't been able to plant, but they do the progressions on what the trees grow. I remember the presentation at Hill Farm. We knew that for the first few years you were going to see those, but as those trees grow in, it'll back up. Some of the developers have come in because I do like to watch John on TV. Sometimes they come in with, we're going to do evergreens, we're going to do bigger trees, we're going to come in with something more mature. We think with the slope that this will be covered with X, Y, and Z, or you're not going to see anything during, 3-4 months of the year. Or I'm sorry, you'll only see something 3 or 4 months a year, and that might be that wall of evergreens. So there are definitely.
Look, the planning board has done a great job with the screening. I'm not saying they haven't, and they've gotten a lot of slack, a lot of flack, a lot of heat, because somebody sees the corner of one solar panel. It's a myth to say that something is going to be invisible. Okay, and I think people take fully screened, to and liken it or conflate it to meaning invisible, and that's just not possible. It's not a reasonable, thing to actually believe that 300 solar panels are going to be invisible to the human eye from every angle. I think I made a comment one day, like, what happens if you're flying over it in an airplane? What do you got to screen it from the sky too? I mean, what does fully screened really mean? You could get really crazy on the definition, and I think the planning board has done a great job, given the fact that, the term fully screened in our law, it's not attainable. It's just not. I mean, you're going to see it. It also depends on how you define fully screened. Some people define fully screened as completely invisible. But that being said, I will consider moving forward if we go with like a very, very, very strict criteria. And I would have to see what properties, once we select the criteria, what properties would be in play. And then I'd make my decision. But right now, you know how I feel about it. I don't want it in residential. I don't think it belongs there. It just doesn't.
So why spend it, you don't want it in residential, okay? And I accept that. And then you say, but I'll consider something in residential even though I know it can't be fully screened, which seems contradictory.
No, because I think it's a reasonable approach. We're trying to make a law. If it was me just making the law and I was banging the gavel, I said, this is the law, that would be my law. But I don't just, I am 1/5 of the vote. And if none of us can evolve or can compromise, then we'll never get anything done. And so in the interest of getting things done, I voted on stuff before that I didn't agree 100%, but got me across the finish line because I thought it was enough. That I compromised. I had to compromise, but I didn't compromise too much, and I thought that it was reasonable enough. And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, compromise is something where we all walk away saying, I wish I got a little more, but I could live with it.
And that's correct.
And I appreciate that with you, Sergio, because I know we've had many conversations about things. John, are you available on Friday this week? That you know of?
I believe I am. What's the date of that? The 24th?
24th.
Yes.
Maybe we could meet in the morning, 10 a.m., and you and I could go through some of this, try to put it in, and then send a draft out. Adam, you around Friday?
No, I have a lot of thoughts on if you're going to do a,
Please send them, because I
just
appreciate
amend the law. We haven't even begun to talk about lot coverage. Okay, I think our current law says 80%. Some of those laws say 25%. All right.
It's 50. I'm
Fif-
looking at,
fif- Yeah.
addition to code limits coverage to 50% of the lot.
Lot
That's
coverage
Yorktown.
is
But unlike Yorktown, that's not Yorktown.
is a critical thing. Yorktown's is very high at 80%. Okay. When
Is
you're-
it truly 80% with the setbacks that they are? I don't know if we could.
It's 80% coverage, okay? So they have to figure out and meet their coverage requirements. But if you think about putting up a house, I think a house says with a house and a driveway and the garage and whatever, 30% coverage. So we're allowing considerably more coverage. I'm not even sure what the commercial site plan requirements are in terms of coverage.
Of course.
But
It's
we're-
two different things. I mean,
We're allowing
two different things.
considerable coverage. So there's
That would be part of our criteria.
Yeah, and the screening thing, there's a big difference between screened from the property line or screened from the residence on the property. There's a big difference, all right?
Oh, do me a favor, Susan.
That was actually in the-
Send me those notes, because I know we've looked at this and we've talked about it in the initial draft. But anything, and for the entire board, any of your concern, get it to me by Friday morning, 10 a.m. And let's take a look at it. Let me at least be able to work with our professionals and draft something that we can redline and move around. But I don't want to say, let's put everything off and come back for another meeting.
No, we gotta get
and-
it, we gotta
yeah,
move it, you're
because-
right.
I think we should have enough, if the decision of tonight is to go with revising the current law and just tightening the criteria, I would like to, if all of us submit what we want, and then I would like to come back and have another meeting and say,
As soon as we have a
These are the
draft, then we'll do that. But we could,
well,
That's
even
exactly what I
before the
said. Well-
even before the attorneys and John start drafting.
I think if we get something on paper, then there's something tangible that we could refer back to and say, I don't like this line.
and
I like this.
right.
I mean, I think
The framework of the laws.
that's where we gotta, I think.
And I do like a red line version of the law because it puts the whole thing in context. I hate it when we have a little thing here, oh, this is what we're changing in the law, because it doesn't,
Don't understand it.
right,
yes.
doesn't have the full
I think-
context.
I
So
think
I operate on a whole
Now,
document.
Here's the last question, because, what about battery storage?
Well, no,
Well,
so,
that's the next
so that's
discussion.
the next discussion. And I'll tell you my feeling on it right now is that until the safety and the protocols are a little tighter, I am in favor, even if we sunset right now, to have it come back, but I'm in favor of removing it from our code as a use, an allowable use, until, even if we sunset to look at it in 2 years, to see where the technology goes. I have a lot of concerns of the safety of our first responders.
Sunset the current law?
Yeah, you can take a look at that, correct, Diane?
Sunset or just repeal it.
All right, well, okay.
Would it be just repeal, like we repealed the
Well,
recycling
but
facility?
to have it where you have a date that you have to look at it by. Adam?
What's the actual?
So say we're going to ban battery energy storage systems, take it out of an accessible use for the next until January of 2027, and then we're going to look at it again to see where the technology has come from, or should we just do it as a law and then look at it based on the technology? I just don't want it to slip away. And I think we should be responsible enough down the line, and I may not be here in 2027, 28,
I'd have
whatever.
to think through how to
Word
construct something where, I think I understand what you're saying. You're saying we're going to allow them for another 2 years.
No, we're not going to allow them
Oh,
for 2
we're gonna-
years.
we're gonna-
It's a moratorium.
So
So, but a 2-year moratorium,
Well-
can we do it?
Two 12 months with the right.
I don't. I have to think about that. You want? So you're saying we ban them for 2 years, and then after 2 years they're automatically viable again if we don't do anything?
No, they ban them for 2 years. Well, actually, I guess that's what would happen if you did a sunset.
We could
Unless
ban
we
'em
didn't
and
bring it
sunset-
back.
Let that sunset, yeah.
So probably a moratorium. If we could do the moratorium for 12 and then extend it for 12.
I mean, there's all sorts of problems with that at this point.
Too long
Yeah.
a moratorium.
Yeah,
That's too long a moratorium.
you should just remove it.
Just remove it. Okay, and then address it.
Address it when
Yeah,
you're
whenever
ready
you
to have a
wanna
new law.
take it up again.
I'm fine with that right now because I'm not convinced on the safety measures keeping up. And then the concern is for the first responders, our residents, and the watershed. Because we put these things in the watershed and we don't really know what they're leaking out if there is a problem.
They should be, whoever, and part of the law, I would say they would have to do some kind of a contribution or something to our fire departments, because they're gonna be fighting this new thing. And they
Well,
don't-
that's
they may or may
that's
not
if we
have the
bring it
equipment.
back. That's if we bring
Yeah.
it back.
So that, I think, would be my first criteria, but I'm with you on that.
I
With
just
what?
wanted to hit JT and
Repealing the
Sarah.
law.
Just what are you going to do with the ones that have been installed?
I think they are here and we can't really change that.
Right.
Uh,
So
I know
they're
that-
just they're going to be legal non-conforming. Is that what you just leave them
Yeah, and then if
exist
they
as they exist?
exist as they exist, and then if they get decommissioned, then they're gone.
What if they need to repair?
That repair is fine if it's the same ownership, I think.
What do you suggest?
Well, we'll
I don't have a suggestion on that
Oh,
front
oh.
right now. It's a little issue that I think I'm suggesting that you think about it and we think it through.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then, and if anyone's in favor of keeping them, I am slightly amicable to lithium phosphate instead of lithium ion, because lithium phosphates can be put out easier, but I still have that concern over residential areas and the discharge from one of those if they're on fire, especially, as I said, in the watershed. So,
Do we know, has the town issued any of battery storage for homes, the tier one?
that's not, that's not,
Has what? Have they
Has the
been
town-
installed? Oh, yes.
All right, I know we have two tier twos. We've got the one on Gomer Court, behind BJ's.
You're going to get one at Foothill.
Foothill's gonna have one. IBM has one. All right,
IBM has one. Yep.
all right. So if you have a law that repeals section blank, okay, do you need another law that says the ones that are pre-existing as of this date can do maintenance, replacement, whatever,
Well,
the point?
That has to be talked about. I think the law is in the code that speaks to that. That's pretty standard that you can repair, but you can't expand. But there's also the question of, I don't think IBM has installed theirs yet, so if you repeal it, will they be able to go forward? There's some practical issues to think about.
All right, good.
and we could get with planning on those pre-existings that we need to discuss. But look, I think if someone's done the work, they have the project and the paperwork.
And I think the other part of that you brought up,
Is
that you
pr-
touched on, is the tier one.
Is the
in-
tier ones,
in
I have no
homes.
idea what's happening with that.
I don't know if you want to ban those as well, if you find that those have
Well,
similar issues
I
or
believe
not.
most of those are Tesla, and I believe most of those are going lithium phosphate from a previous conversation, but we should definitely look at that before we finalize anything and have a law that goes out.
I think the planning, you have to ask the building department how many permits they've issued, and do their records show what type of lithium battery?
Yeah.
I don't think we have any idea what's
But John
happening.
will. John Landy will.
Yeah.
Sarah, anything to input on that?
Yeah, the task force did talk about it, and because of the concerns, we would be okay in eliminating the lithium-ion battery energy storage systems, but the lithium phosphate iron is substantially safer, and really is what people nowadays have moved to. So we would continue to be supportive of those types of
The
installations.
tier 1 home versions, those are the lithium phosphate?
I'm not as knowledgeable about that, but for the regular tier 2, lithium phosphate iron is being used in those larger scale installations now, and the problems were really with that first generation type of plant.
Well, we have the same issues in residential neighborhoods, as far as I'm concerned, for large-scale battery storage. So, I mean, for me, there's that issue, which I believe is pretty close to being the same.
Well, I think that the laws look for setbacks, John, on those setbacks from houses and different,
For the large scale?
yeah.
Yeah, there's setbacks, yes.
What's a normal setback? 50?
I think it's 50 feet.
Yeah,
I
I think it's 50. I'd like to check it to be sure, but I think it's about that, yeah.
And,
If you repeal, do you want to still allow the tier 1 for the homeowner?
well, let me get the information from John Landy. I did write it down.
Those systems are, as I understand it, I'm by no means an expert on
Endorsing
it.
them.
But I think the residential systems are more integrating with the battery storage and the solar than you might think these days. So, whereas the large-scale solar are just really, from my experience, starting to come and think about adding batteries.
So we need a lot more information, especially dealing with tier 1s.
Well, with the tier 1s, for sure.
Yeah, we need more information.
And I think Sarah's right. For instance, the Gomer Street installation changed through its approval process because of the technology changed. So, I wouldn't doubt that they potentially have the lithium phosphate there installed there. The one down on by Staples is Tesla, and they are on their second installation. They have one that was there from the first one, I think, in the state,
Yeah.
and then the second one is there now, and that might have the same technology, but I'd have to check.
All right, if maybe we could discuss that a little more on Friday. I'll give some information back to the board, and I'll have to get the information from John Landy as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to ban, the storage at houses, because the whole idea is we're trying to promote solar, and, if you're going to put solar panels on your house, and that's part of the whole plan,
But we want to have the safest method there. Because,
Absolutely.
Because if
But
your
I
if your
wouldn't
house
for
catches
banning it.
fire and burns mine down because they can't put it out, I'm gonna be looking for you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
So, all right,
Luckily, you guys don't live near each other,
that's true.
so it'll be okay.
So a little bit more homework there, but thank you. We have a lot there. Is everyone good with that on the solar? On the battery energy storage that we're talking about?
I'm good.
Yeah,
So we'll get that information.
Yes, now everybody should get a fire blanket for your dry.
Thank you, fire blankets.
Get a
thank you,
fire
Sarah.
blanket.
All right, so let's open up for courtesy of the floor.
I think I need some solar energy right now. I'm so tired.
Good evening, Jay Kopstein.
Hi, Jay.
First, I agree with Sergio. Ground mounted, I don't care where they ought to be banned. They're ugly, they're industrial plate glass. That's first. Secondly, I remind the board that we reduced the screening the last time we spoke about it because the planning board said the screening, the way we had it in the law, was not reasonable. Somebody mentioned resilience. Can somebody tell me when we had the last power outage when the sun was out? Well, when it's snowing, when it's thunderstorming, you're not getting the solar panels to do anything for you. You mentioned it. They put nuclear upstate. Not only that, us downstaters have an additional fee on our electric bill to support the nuclear upstate.
And then we get to also
That's
pay.
shocking.
also
Don't
get to
interrupt
pay
me on my
Con Ed.
time.
Sorry, go on. Sorry.
We had the Foothill people in complaining they couldn't put housing in, single-family homes, because of the Foothill development. Now we're talking about the possibility of other developments. Maybe we'll have more. Hey, what the hell? Have a 25-story building near a solar farm, because nobody wants single-family homes. Floating zones, are we prepared to have a public hearing, both here and in the planning board, every time we try to establish a floating zone? All right, now I'm going to go to a different tack on something else. We had numerous discussions on the traffic on Halleck's Mill Road. And everybody, all of our experts who don't live over there said, oh, if we do anything to Halleck's Mill, there's going to be traffic Armageddon in town. Well, this past month, Halleck's Mill Road has been closed for 4 days. 2 by the highway department, 2 by a utility company. We did not have traffic Armageddon. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
You still have time.
Well, that's because I stopped him from interrupting me.
I was just excited about how much we get to also pay Con Ed and NYSEG for the privilege of them giving us crappy service. So
Jay, would you give your time to me?
I don't know if it's in the law that it's transferable. This
Hey, Larry.
municipal law stuff.
I yield my time to Larry.
Oh, thank you. Larry Killian, Yorktown Heights.
Hi, Larry.
Thank you very much for your December 7th presentations about solar and battery, and thank you very much for your discussions tonight in terms of making the law. Tax certioraries.
Diana?
Give property owners a reduction in past and future taxes. The tax cert you granted last week for the building with doctors' offices confirms that when we build new commercial space, as we did at the Caremount Medical Building on 118, it reduces the amount of money we get from existing similar properties. So in 2022, 2 similar buildings with medical offices received a 19% reduction in their taxes. For the building approved last week, it was up to a 25% reduction. Other similar buildings are going to get this reduction. We must include these losses in our revenue projections. In terms of retail, in August of 23, a strip mall on East Main Street got a 33% reduction in their tax bill. You were forced last month, to a large extent, when you raised your taxes because you approved a tax cert for the JV Mall for a 2/3 reduction in their tax bill. This affected the expense side of the budget to the tune of $800,000 and $187,000 on the revenue side, which will continue each year. Why a 2/3 drop in assessment at the mall? We've heard about the judge in Texas and bankruptcy, but a major reason not so far addressed was adding a massive amount of new retail space in the Lowe's BJ corridor. The assessed value of the mall had not changed since Sears was there as an anchor. Breslin development at the Lowe's site, just minutes down the Taconic, captured for their location the more profitable lines from Sears, and of course they shed the less profitable areas. This decline in the assessed value of commercial real estate and the ongoing loss of tax money should have been discussed at the budget hearing last month. Isn't this a major problem? What is your plan to deal with it? And I cede my time to Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.
Oh, Mark, you're out of time.
Mark Lieberman, I live on Wells Street. So I have four brief items. One is, and I don't know if it's procedural, but I would think for respect, it would be better to have the American flag over there where there's a light rather than over here in the dark.
Procedural.
It is procedural, has to be on that side.
Gotta be on its own right.
Okay, I would like to put a light in over the flag. Second item is you were going to get me the information on how much we would have received in taxes had we not put the 485B in place. I haven't got that, but from a third party, I got the number $1.5 million, but I'd like to know if that's accurate. Third item is I truly appreciate the resolution for Martin Luther King each year and anti-Semitism each year. But I was disgusted last night when Elon Musk did a Sig Heil and nobody spoke out about it. Read the papers. On the
Excuse
solar-
me, ladies and gentlemen, we'll address.
And on the solar discussion, nobody's talking about if residents don't take that property, you don't do business, more business in town. If you get residents moving into the community, they're going to go shopping. If you put a solar farm in, you don't increase shopping. So and I wrote to you this a while back. So if one of your goals is to increase local business and encourage local businesses to be here and fill the space, you should have residents moving in rather than glass monuments. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Good evening, Brian Sillick.
Hi, Brian.
Yorktown Heights. Couple of things. The agenda says public comments. It doesn't say courtesy of the floor. I would like to speak more than 3 minutes, if I may.
You may not.
No. Okay.
Good question, though.
Since we're on solar farms, I'd like to go to Navajo Sports Complex. It would be a perfect place to put a solar farm. Absolutely. We'd save all the trouble of traffic, the rest of it. So think about it.
Maybe solar farms at Seward.
All right, starting from the top. Everything that you guys want to put in, if you start at the top and you say, okay, Mohegan Lake, you want 144 units. Catherine Street, 118. Foothill, 20. Then we get to IBM, which is called AMS, 185. And we go to, of course, Navajo Fields, which keeps changing the numbers. 254 now, originally 348, taking the original number and taking off that. And using the now, we end up with 721, correct me if I'm wrong, rental, combination units, whatever. The commercial property that they want to put in, we still don't have enough information, how many, what, where, when. We're going to have a lot of cars, a lot of trucks, a lot of everything. If you come out on Route 6, it's going to be terrible. But looking at it even further, and you tell me if I'm wrong again, the recycling plant's going to come back to bite us. The attorney, whose name was, what is it? I have it here, Dennis, well, you know who he is, the lawyer, Dennis Lynch, is going to come back and sue the town, I'm sure. The town is going to lose, most likely. You'll pay through the nose, and he'll get what he wants, 200 feet, 101-foot setback, he'll change it. Or he could sell the property to Navajo Sports Complex to that developer and have 500 units in there. But to put this property without having enough information into the overlay district, it would be, you can't do it, in my opinion. We don't have enough information. But if you start building how many? Now, 254 units and the recycling plant, trucks going back and forth, everything else, and they admitted it would be one every 5 minutes. It's going to be horrendous. You can't widen the roads, and I'd like you to reconsider putting it in the low overlay district. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thanks, Brian.
Hi, Charles O'Neill, Yorktown resident. I was concerned the other night. I was watching TV, and it was one of the board meetings, and Michael Grace, lawyer number 3, CJ, were pontificating that Susan was the poor suffering people of Osceola. And I'm saying to myself, wasn't Michael Grace that he was the town supervisor? He was the town lawyer, and he could have done something, but he didn't care about the people suffering. He didn't care. He didn't put the sewers in. And then this week I was talking to a civil engineer at Jefferson Village, and he told me that all this about the sewers is a big lie. He says because if CJ, who's the developer, wants to put in 254 units, he has to put in sewers. He cannot get around it, so don't let Michael Grace stand there and tell everybody in this town how great the developer is to put the sewers in. He said, because just think about it. For 254 people, or 254 units, he says even times it twice is 500 people. The septic field would have to be about 14 acres. So it's a big lie. He has to put the sewers in, come up front, tell the people in Osceola, this is the way life is. We're going to put the sewers in because we need them. It's not because he's a nice guy. It's not because he loves us. It's because he has to do it. And Michael Grace is standing there, and he, of all people, says to Susan, and I'm not a big opponent of Susan, let me tell you. But I'm telling you right now, that was an embarrassment, and I think he should be censured for it. He had no right saying them people are suffering down there. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie.
Good evening, Sarah Wilson again. Just a few brief comments. I know I missed the proclamation about Martin Luther King Jr. Day here in Yorktown, but thank you. And we had a great event yesterday at Grace Lutheran Church. You know, there was some lively conversation, a little sing-along music, and we learned about some of Dr. King's lesser-known sermons. So it was a fun event, the 3rd annual community event. So thanks to Grace Lutheran for providing the facility for it. And while I'm up here speaking about Grace, our annual Super Bowl of cereal is underway. And our goal last year, Grace donated 450 boxes of cereal, and the Lions Club participated as well. And we had a drop-off bin here at Town Hall and at the library, and I'm hoping we can do that again this year. And I know in total we had over 800 boxes of cereal that went to the food pantry. And I was at a meeting of the food pantry in Mohegan Lake tonight, and they said thanks to that donation, they and the other donations of food that they've received, they haven't had to buy any cereal at all. So that's saving their money for other things. So anyway, the Super Bowl of cereal goes through Super Bowl Sunday, which some of you might know is February 9th. So we have a couple of weeks in which to achieve our goal. Ed, I know you and your wife Carol were very generous donors as well, so hopefully
We already have about 2 dozen boxes in the garage.
Very good, very good. And I'll just point out the comment about traffic. You know, solar farms don't create any traffic at all. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Good evening, Joanne Selick, Yorktown Heights. Hi. Some might think people are losing interest in the Navajo project. I assure you that is not the case. Many watch the municipal station. Recently, while I was in my bank, a man came over to me saying, he saw me on TV, shook my hand, and said, I quote, "Thank you for speaking up for us, but I don't think this town board cares what we think. They will do whatever they want." I heard similar comments from people in supermarkets, McDonald's, etc. I would like to address some comments from last week's meeting. I, Charlie, have no issue with Michael Grace now. He has a client. He's representing his client for now. As a matter of fact, I also empathize with his frustration. My issue is with the elected officials. The board adopted the overlay December 29, 2021. We were at the height of COVID, on lockdown, and at the height of the holiday week. Think about that. John Rabbits, VP of Westchester Business, said, I quote, "The overlay will revitalize business while preserving the character we cherish. How can 254 units preserve the character when compared with 20 single-family homes?" Councilman Esposito, when referring to Navajo last week, said, quote, "In lieu of doing nothing. If we followed the present zoning, no one would consider building 20 houses doing nothing. If Navajo goes through, Route 6 would become an unmanageable disaster with an additional 500 cars on a single-lane road. It can barely handle the traffic now. There is no space to expand." Last week, Councilman Murphy asked who was paying for the hookup and how much is set aside for the sewers. He did not get an answer, nor did we. We're told the people of Osceola have been suffering, and this will only be addressed if multifamily units are built. Isn't this quid pro quo? Also, it was brought to my attention, due to water issues, the developer should be required to dredge Lake Osceola and the JV retention pond. If this is not done, you'll have another 1,500 residents in Jefferson Village who will be suffering. Supervisor Lachman made clear last week how this board will vote. I quote, "The odds are you're getting into that zoning." So why are we here? This board has earned a dubious reputation with enormous bipartisan opposition. I know some of you personally, and I have to say I'm really distressed and saddened to make that observation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Joanne. Any other comments for courtesy of the floor? Motion to close courtesy of the floor.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well, we'll start on the lighter stuff. Sarah, we did talk about the cereal bowl, but actually in my comments, one of the young men from the Leos is doing something at the high school, and he asked about a bin out here, so we will have a bin. So let's see, we'll jump up a little bit. Mark, I do need to follow up on the 485B. I did speak with our assessor, but with the holidays and things, it's been a little crazy, but we'll get there. I'm wondering what third party gave you a $1.5 million, if you could talk to me offline about that, because I'd also like to know if they told you how much it generated, because it would probably be about actually a little more now. So just that we're looking. Thank you, both you and Sarah, for the appreciation for the MLK resolution. No idea what you're talking about, Elon Musk, but honestly, this isn't the forum for that, for us to say one way or another, unless there was something really there, and apparently there's disagreement in the audience. I'm going to talk about the existing properties in solar for a minute because we had two comments that are both true. Solar doesn't generate traffic, but solar also doesn't generate commercial use, and some of those areas. There was talk about the mall losing, like, because of Lowe's and BJ. The mall had opportunities to market to them, and they didn't. Sears was going out of business way before Lowe's came into effect in Yorktown. Might have even been pretty much out, and they went bankrupt as a company. So a lot of that stuff sort of, there is an ebb and tide and there's a flow. And, we have people get up and say we need to shop locally and then talk to us about all the cardboard that they're generating because they're just shopping on Amazon. So you have to make choices in life on what you want to do. My wife wanted to, do something easy for some pet stuff. I'm like, no, let's go to the local pet store and let's spend some money there. And that's what we did. So it's just the decisions we make on what's easier, what's not easier. And as for that, there's there. Now, I'll also say that I've heard many times we don't have enough medical. We can't get doctor's appointments. We can't get in. So is the problem that we've built medical, or is the problem that the medical that was existing was inefficient or not attractive to people who wanted to go there? And that's really a big decision process. I like going to the Caramount building. It's clean, it's neat. I don't feel like I can't touch anything. And some of those other buildings, you smell mold, you smell mildew, and it's up to them to take care of their property and make sure that it's there. Unfortunately, the certiorari, I don't know if, Adam, you want to speak to that, but that's the law. People could do it. There are companies that just put certiorari's out on every property they own. Mm-hmm. And it's a law. We can't say no. It has to go through. As for the mall in particular, they went through, and you hit the nail on the head. You said they hadn't been assessed for years, and right. And sometimes those assessments are wrong, and then they could go back in and they could ask for it. That is the law. But it is accounted for in a budget. We have a line for it. Sometimes it's on, sometimes it's over, sometimes it's under. But there is a line for certiorari's that are put aside.
And to say that we granted it to them is just not accurate.
No,
It goes
it's
through a court process.
Yeah,
and a court proceeding.
it's a court process. We don't say we're going to give you a certiorari, we're not going to give you a certiorari. It is a court process. Thank you, Sergio.
Mhm.
And then, so, just a little thing. And yes, Joanne, I agree with you 100% on Michael Grace. He has a client. And I always take that into account with any attorney who comes before us. They have a job to do. They're hired for it. And they're going to try to sell it as best they can. We do know that we have people that are suffering on Lake Osceola, a lot with flooding. So that flooding also ends up flooding out their septics and putting, having waste come up through the system, and it is a problem. And yes, the fact that, I did say that there are good odds because we do need sewers, that Osceola could be there. There was a 2019 meeting. It was, actually, no, it had to be 2020. 2020, yeah, you started.
Well, you're thinking
But
about that.
it was 2019.
Oh, 2019, on Zoom, though, so I'm not sure why that was on Zoom. But it had the building department, it had the planning department, it had, not planning board, maybe that was it, town board, and we had Alice Roker on the board still. And Alice spoke specifically about that. Osceola needs a sewers, and she's absolutely right. Alice, besides being a town historian, really knows in that area. But she spoke about sewers, and she spoke about stormwater, and they're both an issue there. We, as a board, we have to look at that, and to say that we would do whatever we want, well, eventually we do have to vote our conscience, and that could be, but we do need to look at what can we do for that area? What can we do for the cleanliness, the sewerage, all of it? It's a whole big package, and it's not an easy decision because it's one of those decisions that you're going to have a lot of people happy about and a lot of people PO'd about, and I understand that, and I will weigh all the situations and be there and then see where we go. Now, the comment was also made, I think, Brian, about the fact that those sewers have to happen, so he's not being a nice. Okay, Charlie, I'm sorry, he's not being a nice guy. You're absolutely right. The sewers have to happen, but there's certain things that can be included. Like you could do on a property a small little sewer plant, and just worry about your own property and pump it up across Route 6. Probably a lot cheaper. But one of the things we spoke about last week that wasn't mentioned, we've put together a list of items. Now, I was supposed to send it out today, but I want to give the board another chance to look at it to see if there's anything else they want to add. And we'll send that. And that's all. This is information we want. And what some of the things on there, the sewers, the route of the sewer, how is it being paid for the people who would have to pay the buy-in? Is that being paid by? And I want everything in writing.
Traffic.
Because
We're looking for more information as well.
Paving. Well,
The good old paving.
So from that we also tonight we're passing a resolution because they did a traffic study, and we want to have that looked at by our experts. I also had a conversation, and I think it's been mentioned before by John Tegeter. The state actually has a grant that they got for doing a full-blown look at Route 6 from Peekskill all the way up to Connecticut to see what could be done. And I spoke to Dr. Becker in Cortland, and he was going to speak to the mayor of Peekskill. And I will speak to Rob Scarano from Somers, although he was sort of in on the conversation and was like, yeah, just let me know. And we need to go to DOT and say, why aren't we spending this money on something that's much needed? Because we have to see what we could do to systematically change Route 6 so the traffic doesn't build up, so that there aren't all of these issues. Because these projects are important, both commercially, tax base wise, and a lot more important, to be honest with you, than solar tax base wise. Solar is, and we had that discussion earlier with the solar. So we need to look at that. But square one for that project, if it goes through, is the sewers. And the sewers actually need to be completed before they build. So it's something that you can't wiggle out of, because we don't have to go ahead with the building permits unless the sewer is done, because you're not doing it on septic. Absolutely right. We've said that here before, and we don't want new septic per se if we could avoid it anyway.
The idea is environmentally is to get the septics, to minimize that. Absolutely.
As for the recycle plant, I will take A-Rod up against Lynch anytime. Mr. Rodriguez will battle that if it comes to it. But honestly, we are as of right for taking a specific use out of our zoning. And if someone wants to sue because they're litigious, they are more than welcome to. That's the law, and I think I said that night, where he wanted to correct me and say he promised, not threatened, because I said you could threaten the lawsuit. That's fine. But to be honest with you, it's within our right as a town board, and looking at all of the different things, we felt that it was an inappropriate use, and it was, a recycling facility there does not work. I would have to walk the property again to see if Navajo would be able to do anything, but I think that is mainly steep slopes, so I don't know if that's really an option. Site work on something like that would be pretty heavy to try to tie it in contiguously, because I know all of the steep slopes are on the east end of Navajo, so they would have some problems there regardless. But all of the steep slope issues, I know Susan was very very detailed on her comments on the wetlands, the floodplain measurements. That's all going to be part of a record before it goes anywhere else, if it does, to be honest with you, because they do need to realize this. And when we get that commitment on paper for the sewers, that goes first. You can't get around it. So we would know. There are some big things. Unfortunately, I don't know if they could drag Osceola or dredge Osceola. I know Diane has been spending a lot of time looking at maps on another issue, and that's something we looked at. And she said something that resonated with me.
Diana?
What did I say?
Diana,
sorry. I'm tired.
I mean, maybe there was another one, but we don't know.
Well, I'm dropping letters. So with Diana, she was looking at another project, but happened to look at Osceola, and she raised something that I think you know that what I'm talking about, that I'd like to look into a lot more. But I do know that it would be awfully hard for anyone to go and drag Bogdadoff Pond that wasn't a property owner of that area. So that's an issue, although Sergio pointed out that if we can try to do some type of water retention that would slow the flow in, he said some of the water coming out of Bogdadoff when he was down there by the garbage grate is actually swirling, so he thinks that it isn't able to exit easily because there's too much water coming through. It was an interesting observation. I asked him to show me it. We'll go down and take a look when it's a little warmer.
Right where the trash gate is under the the Hill Boulevard culvert, the new one that they built.
Yeah, so, it's something that we'll definitely, they'll definitely take a look at, but, Sergio's been trying to track down the owner of Bogdadoff Pond. He's knocked on some doors.
I have.
He's had some doors slammed in his face.
Yes.
So, but we will keep
Rick
trying.
Silva said he might have some documents.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you. That would be great. Who was that? Rich De Silva?
Yeah, I think
Good.
because he used to be president of JOC.
Yep.
This goes back a long.
Well, I
long
asked
time.
I asked John to blow the dust off some boxes too in planning, and Dan is supposed to be looking as well.
Sergio, that doesn't mean they won't keep
But-
slamming the door in your face. So be
That's
careful,
true.
okay? Just
But
ring the bell.
I keep going back.
so let me just look through this real quick. Dave, do you want to talk about Halleck's Mills since you had the close down on there?
Yes, Alex Mills did not create the Trafficageddon that was expected when we closed.
Talk into the mic.
Oh.
The man
Hello.
behind the curtain says.
I'm sorry, I was sleeping. No.
Thanks a
You
lot,
guys wake
Dave.
up out there, all right? Alex,
I'm up.
I'm up. All right, stay with me. It'll be over soon. Halleck's Mill was closed for 4 days, actually, and they were consecutive days, which was interesting. And the world did not come to an end, So it's time to revisit the options with respect to Halleck's Mills. The options being a dead end, a one-way from 202 to Ridge, or a one-way from Ridge to 202. Speaking of people under pressure, if you live in that neighborhood, rush hour, day or evening,
gotta
and-
stop,
oh gosh, and like I said previously, I was out there for hours, and 82% of the vehicles that went down that road were from Connecticut. Not that we don't love people from Connecticut, but stay in your own state.
You want to declare war on Connecticut next week, Dave?
Huh?
Do you want to declare war on Connecticut, maybe?
Well, maybe, if need be.
I'm ready. I'm ready to vote on closing that street right now.
202 on 202 from Ridge to the light when you close.
Well, I've actually, oddly enough, most people that go up from Ridge to 202 make the right and then they make the left on Bolden Road. So the only thing I could assume at that point is they're trying to get to the Parkway.
Yeah.
But you say the sky didn't fall.
Susan,
Mike.
hit the mic.
I'm sorry. The sky didn't fall, which is good news.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering if it's in hindsight now. It would have been interesting to have taken traffic counts to see how much the traffic might have increased. That yes, there had to be an increase, but that it wasn't sufficient to create the problem.
Right.
But since you do have that experience of 4 days, I agree with you, Dave. It's time to relook, at those options to finally, and then just force the issue.
Dave, if we could take it up at the next traffic
Yeah.
committee meeting.
So I just got a couple of comments real quick.
Actually, I need to do one other thing before
Yes,
we get
sir.
there. We do have a letter from Mr. Kratzoff, who couldn't stay due to health reasons. Mr. Kratzoff, I did read this earlier when you dropped it in my office, and I would find it hard to do a town board resolution acknowledging prion-related deaths. I wasn't able to find any records of any of the three people that you mentioned when I did a search on obituaries, and I just, would not feel comfortable without factual coroner's reports being able to do this, and I don't think it's something that we could get. I know that you have something that can identify prion, and I don't think that that is really something with us. I know there is a center that looks at prion as a poisoning, and I think that it would be best to go to them. If you want to contact my office, I left the screen open for the people, but I cannot issue demand on any prion contamination victims without knowing that they actually exist per se, and it's a something that is proven. So I thank you for your comments, but it's really something above and beyond what we would be looking at.
May I just make a comment about Alex Mill and then I'm done? Dave, also, you are right. They go up from Ridge there and then make the right, and then on Baldwin, and either they're going towards the highway or French Hill now has two or more I guess what you would call them early drop off or like child care services
they have
for the
childcare
school.
there.
So
Universal pre-K.
yeah, the universal PK is there, but there's also something with the corners. And then there's 1010's there for before and after care. So I do see a lot of people that will cut through, hook that left, drop off their babies, and then go onto the highway and off to work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping they're not coming from Connecticut, but,
No, I'm thinking they're
there was a
local.
lot of Connecticut traffic. And for the life of me, I'd love to understand exactly where they're going, but, until I
They're
start
going to the
following
florist.
them, I can
They're
only
going to
be in one
florist. They
spot
got,
watching them.
The best florist in town.
Sergio, you had some comments?
So just to address Mr. Killian, Larry, I know you mentioned what we lost, but we don't know how much came in with all the new development, and so I think that's an interesting number too. I'm not saying it's going to be top heavy that way or yours, but I think knowing both sides of the coin is important and not just one side. Mark, I agree with you. I'd rather see a well-manicured house on a property that has residents in it that are going to shop in Yorktown than solar farms in a residential neighborhood. That's where I'm at. That's where my heart is. Charlie, I know you mentioned that nobody's talked about the septics. But the guy that we kept messing his name up, Rich Giuseppe Frangisco, that guy?
Williams.
What was it? His name's Rich.
Rich
right?
Williams.
Rich Williams. No, thank you.
Or Rich.
He actually did mention it. He said it the last meeting. He said that we could build. I thought he said 14 houses, but I could be wrong on the number. But he did say that the sewers are necessary, so it's not a secret. I estimate, in my rough estimate, you're looking at north of 4 million, if not north of 5 or 6, to put that in. So I don't think he's, I know that it's a considerable contribution, and to Ed's point, he could consider putting a pump system in a pump station right on his property and pumping it across the street. So. Yeah, there is some value there. We are looking for more information. We have a ton of questions. Ed circulated an email with us and said, hey, what are we looking to find out? I'm personally looking for guarantees. If you're going to put the sewers in, I want to know what that's going to look like. I want to know what that's going to entail. I want to know, and I want actually something in writing. So this way there's no wiggle room if we do decide to send them into the overlay zone. I want to make sure that actually gets built.
And let me correct something though, Sergio. I actually didn't circulate an email because I don't want Susan to think she was left out. I asked you guys last meeting and then followed up with an email if you hadn't
That's
gotten
correct.
something.
That's correct.
Because Susan did get her stuff promptly over.
No, you're absolutely
You get a
right about
gold
that,
star, Susan.
Joanne, I think.
Tired. Everyone else here is working. I'm tired. I'm done.
Joanne, I think my comments were taken out of context when I said doing nothing. I meant doing nothing on 6N there on East Main Street, not doing sewers, I think is what I was referring to, as opposed to not doing. I mean, if they want to build 20 houses, that is considerable. I just commented on building one house as opposed to a solar farm, and I thought that would be considerable in a comment to Mark. So you're absolutely right. I did say that, but I don't think it was intended to mean like if we don't do this big project that 20 houses. And maybe it came across that way, but I was talking actually about doing nothing like the sewers, and I think I don't remember. I'd have to look, but I believe I think I said that area has been deteriorating, for years, and doing nothing, is not, it's not going to improve on its own. I think it was something like that I was talking that I said, and it was in that context. As far as the traffic study, we're looking to pressure the state. Ed's working on it, and they have the grant. I believe it's from Senator Harcum, right?
Actually, I believe it came from the Senate, but it could have come federally or just from Albany.
And it's, I think, $2 million.
Yes.
So they have $2 million to study the traffic from Peekskill all the way to Connecticut on 6. I know that Mr. Tegeter had mentioned that he had several meetings a while back, and then they kind of just fell off the planet, right, John? Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Meaning the DOT, and so the meeting stopped. They have the money to do the study.
Actually, John also did point out they might be doing the study and just not communicating to anyone. But
that's probably what they.
But we're gonna follow up. It needs to be.
And as far as us passing the resolution tonight and I just want to get it out there, to allow our expert that works for the town, right, that's hired by the town, to look at the traffic study that was given to us by Creative Living. Creative Living is on the hook to pay the expense. So we're not paying our traffic guy to look at their traffic study and spending town money in order to have that done. It's typical practice that the developer covers the cost. Our town guy is not Philip Greeley. No. It was in the past. He has done stuff in the past, but at this juncture, no, it's not.
Well,
Who is our guy?
I'm not sure. I think Transpo was doing the. We have the resolution for.
John? Transpo?
Transpo.
It's Transpo, just so you know, okay? So, yes, we are looking for more information. We're taking this very seriously. It is something that could have significant positive impacts on that corridor.
And they are independent.
And they are independent. Yeah. Transpo?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Transpo is independent. That's everything I needed to say. Thank you.
Pat?
Mine was we put all of our questions in with Ed, and a lot of them are traffic, the sewer hookups, how's the town going to benefit from it? And we all know that this project would not go through without the sewers. And they're not throwing us a bone. We know that they need it more than we need it. We know that. But it's beneficial to a whole neighborhood over there that could use a little help. So, and for Brian, you calculated all the housing that's going on in the town and stuff like that. 2023, Hochul came out with her affordable housing project. Didn't go through. I'm going to just say it right now. But she laid her cards on the table. It's the same thing she did with congestion pricing. Didn't do it. She'd set it up. No, take it back after the election. It went through. She wants 800,000 houses within the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. She wants majority of it to go by train stations, but also bus stops. She also, in there is to remove the barriers. You know what to remove the barriers are? Remove planning and zoning. Mm-hmm. So zoning, we have our zoning go up a certain amount of feet. Her zoning goes up to 5 stories. So there's a more, she showed her hands what she wants to do. It's all hands. She said all hands on deck throughout the state. She wants close to 1 million homes in the state within 10 years. So just a little context behind what's going on behind the screen. That's all.
I just got one more comment. Are you good?
Yeah, no, no,
I'm sorry,
that,
Susan.
no. That's
So lastly, I just want to say that the other thing that I asked, that I inquired about from Creative Living was stormwater sewers. So there's a difference, right? We have sanitary sewers in Yorktown. I was corrected a long time ago. People jumped up because I said something wrong. So we have sanitary sewers, but what happens to the stormwater? And I think Ed touched on it. And I asked him directly. And so that's another question that I added to my list of information that I want. Would he be willing to actually even put stormwater sewers? Now, how that's done, and that's a whole other story. But, you know, if I could get a commitment in writing, then what we could do is we could slow the flow that goes into the lake, which comes down and ends up at the Hill Boulevard culvert, and that's where I noticed the swirling and maybe and it'll probably give the people at Jefferson Village some relief. Do I know that? No. I talked to Ed about it this morning, and I'm tasked with speaking to Dan about possible positive effects if we could get something like that done. And that's something that's, you know, a requirement for me. So, you know, we are looking at it intently, and you know, we're trying to really get as much information and commitment ahead of time as possible. So thank you. I'm sorry. Susan.
Okay. I have two comments related to Navajo. One is on the traffic, and one is on the septic sewer issue. On the sewer issue, somebody here mentioned that Navajo has said, and they said this more than a year ago when they first came out with the proposal, that they could build a pump station and hook up directly onto Route 6. They don't have to do that line down East Main Street. They could get a rezoning to an R3, a multifamily zone. They'd have to subdivide off their athletic facilities, which they obviously want to keep. The difference, and the big difference, is that if they were doing it under a multifamily zone, they might get a maximum of 12 units per acre. In the overlay, they haven't even given us a number, okay, because overlay is calculated by a different way, but it's substantially, it's probably more than double the number of units. That's why they want the overlay zone, okay? So he could do the pump station, okay? And the town has never asked him, well, if you did that, and we don't know the cost, there's a cost, obviously, to building a pump station, okay? What that cost would be, and then how many units would you get, okay? Big difference, okay? So you could, yes, you have to sewer it. I mean, that's a given. There's no option. But he does have another alternative to build it. And it could be suitable for multifamily at an appropriate density. On the traffic, later on in the agenda, you'll see there's a resolution to have the Transpo review the traffic study. When you get to that, I will have many comments about the inadequacy of the proposal, all right? And I will save my comments for that, okay? That I don't think.
Susan, wouldn't it be more appropriate to give it to the paid expert and say, please give us your comments, and let them comment, rather than, for lack of a better word, grandstand on it?
No, we're voting for a resolution.
No, we're voting to pass as a
We're-
transpo.
Yes, but I read the proposal that this is based on, and I'm saying the proposal of what Transpo is going to study is not adequate and doesn't address
the proposal of Transpo.
Yes.
Not of the actual study that's out there.
That's right. I'm saying the Transpo study that our traffic consultant is going to look at is an inadequate proposal, and I could do it now, but I'll do it when we have
That's fine. So, John, hang around.
Okay, and the other
I know
thing,
we had conversation about this morning.
yeah, I don't think it answers the questions
All right.
that everyone has. The other point about this DOT Route 6 study, when we learned about that at the last meeting, okay, that was very interesting, and I think I asked the question then, will that study be done in time to affect the Navajo project? And the answer was definitely not, okay? We have to give, the town board is going to be under pressure to vote on the Navajo, extending it into the overlay district within, let's say, 2-3 months, okay? I think that's reasonable. 1 to 3 months, the town board is going to be, if they provide us with all the information that we requested, in 1 to 3 months, we will be voting to allow it to go into the overlay district. The DOT study is maybe a year from now. We don't even know all the parameters of what they're studying. So while it would be very nice and a very good idea to have that DOT study, that study is not going to have anything to do with whether Navajo should go into the overlay district. So I think that has to be clarified. And when we deal with the resolutions, I'll go more into detail about the transpo proposal.
Sure. Thank you, Susan. Just a couple of comments that came up. There was something that someone said, that why didn't Michael Grace do this? And it's a common theme. First off, as a town attorney, doesn't have the power to do it because that was brought up. As a supervisor, he's part of a board, but we struggle with this because for years and years and years, we've been trying to figure out a way to get sewers into the Halleck's Mills sewer system. And to be honest with you, because of the fact that sewer districts are their own taxing district, it's hard to build that revenue up to be able to spend on the project. So the Lake Osceola Sewer District does not have the revenue that would be able to generate a sewer system. And we can't say, let's take it out of general fund, because if you're not benefiting, Sarah's not benefiting because she lives on the other side of town, or Mark, whoever, Mark lives on the other side of town for sure. I can't charge Mark for it. It's not legal. So there are a lot of roadblocks into how you are able to do the sewers, and and many supervisors have pondered and fought with this and trying to get it, including Susan, myself, Tommy, Matt, Michael Grace, and I will even venture to say that Linda Cooper battled with this as well.
But let me just add that many years ago, I'm not sure, quite what the year was, there was a proposal to develop the Osceola Beach property. That is, of the potential properties for commercial development within the corridor, that is the prime parcel. They had a very interesting mixed-use proposal at the time, which fit into the existing zoning. The planning board was very supportive of it. The developer was going to hook up at his cost to the existing manhole at Hill Boulevard, because the Osceola property is very close to Hill Boulevard, as opposed to the other two potentially developable properties. For a variety of reasons, the project fell through. Depending on who you ask, you're going to get different reasons as to why it fell through. But that property could be developed and hooked up to sewers at the developer's cost, which would also include a few of the houses between the beach property and Hill Boulevard. When that fell through, Michael Grace was supervisor, and he said to the developer, who was still the current owner of the property, "Tell me what you want to do, we'll create the zone for you." All right? And I have that down in writing. He said, "Tell us what you want to do." That project fell through. It was commercial on one level and then I think 2 stories. Very interesting proposal. Planning board liked it very, very much. Okay, so that's what Michael Grace did, and the developer never came up with a proposal. So nothing has happened.
From my
until
understanding, the
overlay.
developer is not going to do anything unless there's an easy way to sewer.
Well,
That
the
was-
overlay could considerably increase the amount of development that
Absolutely.
he could do. But that property is already in the overlay zone. So he could probably build a larger building, more square footage, more apartments, whatever, and then that would help offset the cost of his going into the Hill Boulevard thing. And that is there are 3 vacant parcels within the overlay district now. That is the prime property.
Yep. Which would be great to have it developed.
Yeah, he could do it now.
And if he's not doing it now, he doesn't want to do it now, and he has his reasons for doing it, and unfortunately, we can't hold a gun to his head and make him do it.
Absolutely not.
So
And
that's his-
just having sewers there isn't going to make the difference. And
according to
Michael Grace.
no, not Michael Grace. According to someone else
According to
I
Michael
spoke to,
Grace, it will
there are a
be
few other
developed.
people in that area, and according to them, you know what? That's a big thing for them. All right. So, and since you said you couldn't confirm it, I can confirm who I spoke to, who is not Michael Grace. And I've spoken to Mr. Roberta many times because he also owns a lot on Front Street. Actually, I think he finally sold that.
He sold
but-
that too.
Yeah, but you know what? The reasons are all cost bound, and they're hoping that something forces the town to get sewering in there. People who have property and money want to keep property and money. So, but you know, the Hochul housing plan was mentioned, and I will say that they can put that into the budget and try to pass that without having to go through the process that they were trying to. It is, you talk about bipartisan. When that came out, there was bipartisan support to fight it all throughout Westchester and Long Island, who would be the most effective due to the mass transportation. And I have mentioned many times, I am worried about that being shoved down our throat. It basically 5-story buildings, limited setbacks if you're within a mile of transportation. And there are plenty of bus stops along Route 6, and I could see the Beeline bus stop having one that goes into the property, if that were the case. So I'm very concerned about that being pushed down. The overlay units, you know, I think, Susan, you brought that up, the overlay getting the extra units. You're right, they want to pay for the sewer, and they're not going to be able to pay for the sewer limited. It's economics, and once again, compromise, and knowing, you know, people walk away unhappy on either side. But that really, when it goes to planning, they'd have to really take a hard look at that before they ever got started to make sure it's substantial to be done, because there are a lot of things to overcome that are in the questionnaire, such as wetlands, stormwater.
I think there are floodplains.
floodplains, yep.
Slopes. There are a lot of, yeah, and the calculation that the developer has made is questionable.
Well, he
and
could
even the planning
come
department.
back with the FAR calculations, but that is, if he's following the current law, he's following the current law.
Which
and
is
that's
flawed.
it.
Which is flawed when
Okay,
it comes to
well
calculating.
then bring it up and we
FAR.
could talk about it. And you know, the last thing I want to say, because you know, going back and forth over this, I have nothing but love for those of you that are coming here to speak about what you feel. I know, no, really, because
Keep us on our toes.
well, yes, in a sense it does, but you know, we have to
always on my
really,
toes.
we really have to make hard decisions. And you have to hear the different sides of the story. And they're not all in this boardroom, without a doubt. You know, you go out on the street, like you mentioned, Joanne. Carol hates shopping with me because I get stopped when I go to ShopRite. I have people talking to me for more than half of the time I'm in the store, and she's looking for me saying, can we get out of here?
You should see me on the treadmill when they're trying to ask me about cutting down trees. I'm like, I can't do it.
Jay Kopstein will always come to me with comments, and whether he agrees with me or not, and I appreciate that. Sarah has. Larry, I don't know if you've ever agreed with me, but we've had plenty of conversations, and I appreciate him. I remember Election Day, we were standing outside at Panis having probably a 30-minute conversation. To me, that's invaluable. We don't get where we need to get without that. Once again, in the end, someone's not going to be happy, without a doubt, and we know that. I just, you know, I've said it before. When I make a decision, I know one thing: I could go to bed at night because I did what I feel is right. Am I always 100% correct? Absolutely not. Ask Carol; I'm probably not correct at all, but that's her prerogative. So I see all the husbands smiling on that one. But bottom line is we love this, you know, getting this feedback. I always welcome it. I think just about everyone sitting in this room has my personal phone number. If not, it's all over town anyway. And I will always take your calls. Anytime you have a concern, because I think it is that important. You know, sometimes do you want to crawl into a cave for a week? Absolutely. But you know what? That's the name of the game. Have thick skin or get out. But thank you for the comments. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you have to deal with me.
That's right.
Susan, you saw how he gets with me.
All right. So if we could move on to resolutions.
Let's do it.
appreciate.
Joey, be careful.
Stay and listen to my transpo comments on the traffic.
I'll watch it on TV, she said.
So approve attendance for the 2025 New York State Government Finance Officers Association Annual Conference in Albany. That would be for our comptroller and
careful
deputy
out there.
comptroller and senior account clerk, sending them up to do some training and learning. Award the bid for various chemicals from the Water Pollution Control plant.
Do not read them.
Why not?
Don't read them.
Oh my God.
All right, so I won't.
Everything's in acid or.
So-
Can I interrupt for a second? There was an amended agenda that came out shortly after the first agenda came out. I couldn't see what the difference was.
There was a,
That was
Parks
Pheasant.
and Recreation, there was
A decimal point in the wrong
Oh,
spot.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was the same
I
thing.
looked and I didn't see any
And
significant
I
changes, so
will
couldn't-
say that I laughed when I found it, and Diana had to correct it because she normally catches all that.
Thank you.
So, well, I do have to read, resolve that the bid for ferric chloride be awarded to PVS Technologies. Resolve that the bid for ferric chloride 37% to 40% be awarded to Surpass Chemical. These are all low bidders. Resolve that the bid for the caustic soda 50% be awarded to JCI Jones Chemical, which was a second low bidder since the low bidder had a minimum delivery requirement of 3,500 gallons, which exceeds our
tacked it on the
storage
top?
volume. Resolved be the bid for caustic soda 25% be awarded to Brentag Northern LLC, the low bidder. Resolved that the bid for caustic soda 25% be awarded to Surpass Chemical, the low bidder, at a cost of $612.90. I don't know why we have two.
Different size.
Yeah. The drums are different.
Oh, different size drum. Okay, 55, thank you, and the 320-gallon tote. Thank you. Resolved that the bid for citric acid 50% be awarded to Surpass Chemical, the low bidder, at a cost of $417.81 per 55-gallon drum. Resolved that the bid for sulfuric acid, not more than 51%, be awarded to Coin Chemical, the low bidder. Resolved that the bid for sodium bisulfite, 38%, be awarded to Surpass Chemical, low bidder. Resolved that the bid for sodium hypochlorite, 15%, be awarded to Surplus Chemical, the low bidder. Resolved that the bid for Calgon Poly EZ be awarded to Coin Chemical, the low bidder. And resolved that the contract term for this project shall be for a duration of 1 year commencing on or about 2/9/25 upon mutual consent of the contractor and the town. The contract may be extended for one additional term at the same price, terms and conditions. Extend bid for laboratory services for the Water Pollution Control Plant to AG Environmental. Approve the purchase of Continental multi-stage blowers and associated parts solely supplied by Continental Blower LLC for the Yorktown Water Pollution Control Plant. From the Highway Department, agree with recommendation of Highway Superintendent to maintain Pheasant Lane,
It's actually road. My mistake.
Pheasant Road, until proper ownership can be determined. And that was one of the projects that our town clerk was working on diligently. Thank you for that,
Town
Diana.
planner as well. Yep.
Oh, town planner. I didn't realize you were bothering him too.
Oh, everyone. I was bothering everyone.
All
He's
right.
trying to find the owner so he doesn't have to take care of it.
Right?
This was Dave and my Saturday night date night
Yes.
conversation too. So it's getting a lot of play. From the Parks and Recreation Department, authorize the comptroller to process the following budget transfer for the Parks and Recreation Department. And this is general fund balance, $19,453.78 to park improvement. And funding for this transfer is provided by an insurance recovery in 2024 in the amount of $19,520.05
Can you stop there?
from the damage at Hunter Brook Park, Hunter Brook Fields. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is that damage from the?
That was damage from a tree falling on the backstop of a baseball field that Jim deemed would be better off becoming parking and soccer field. So,
It's not even good for soccer.
all right. So Susan, what would you like
It
to
needs
say
a
about
lot of grass.
Transpo Group?
It's all wrong.
The resolution authorizes the town to hire Transpo at a certain cost based on a certain proposal. The proposal, which was submitted, stated December 30th. I don't think it adequately reviews the traffic issues that the proposal will generate. Let me just read one sentence that kind of sums up a lot of it. We understand that a core issue of this project is to review potential impacts at the intersection of Route 6 and Navajo Road, including evaluation of how much of the site-generated traffic would enter, exit via Route 6 versus East Main Street. The initial plan talks about everything exiting and entering from Route 6 in Navajo. But subsequently, we were told that all the residential development would access 6N Mayapack Street. So that is a major difference. So this plan doesn't properly look at the various intersections. It doesn't look at the intersection of where Mayapack Street turns into 6N at roughly Curry Street, that very awkward turn. There's no analysis of what that traffic is going to be. There's no analysis of the traffic impact on East Main Street through the corridor, okay? Which already has traffic problems. You talk to anybody who lives off the side streets off Perry and Wood. There's no look there. There's no it doesn't factor in the impact on East Main Street coming from AMS, which would come the other way. On the study, it talks about some of the traffic is generated by the athletic facilities. We have no idea how the athletic facilities are going to be used. We need a business plan so we can say how much that kind of a use is going to generate X number of traffic. He's going to look at the parking. Well, the parking, again, you can calculate it for the housing, but we don't know about the athletic use. We need an athletic business plan that's going to be decided. There's talk about traffic calming on East Main Street. Absolutely no details, okay? We need that studied because East Main Street is where the impact is going to be for our residents. And I'm sorry that the Jefferson Village people, aren't here because that's one of their concerns. Okay, there talks about the potential need for signalization at Route 6 in Navajo or at the exit point on Mayapack Street. We need more information on what the cost of either signalization or other improvements would be. This is a totally inadequate proposal. Yes, we have to have Transpo review it, but if they're going to review the traffic study in this report, we're not going to get the information we need about the impact of this proposed development.
Let me just.
It has to be redone. It
So
has to be
Susan,
redone.
I wish I had gotten this out early to you because here are the comments from what we've put together and some of the things that I would like to see as well. Traffic, our consultant needs to look at AMS accuracy of current conditions, the AMS and the accuracy. Is Navajo the secondary? They need to look at that. 6N anticipated improvements and commitment to pay for them. So we know they're coming out on 6N. What are you committing to? What are you looking to do? What are you looking to pay for? And add in the traffic from AMS and also propose Strawberry Road and I guess the Barger Street project that knocks around every so often. The old hotel site.
How much of a possibility is that? But factor in.
That's it, regardless. I know they've been doing traffic studies and all, so all of that stuff needs to be factored in. They'd like to get this moving to get it. They're going to probably be doing additional to add this stuff in, and looking at it again. But I'm not going to not put through what's done now. I'd rather get a consultant report saying X, Y, and Z has not been addressed because they also will know this information and be there. But look, if that's how they want to spend their money, I have no problem. We've asked for another traffic report. We've told we have it. We're going to put it through and let our consultant do his job.
Why not ask Transpo to come up with a revised proposal, and then we can vote on it next week when we have a better proposal? I'm glad to hear that you see the shortcomings in this proposal, so let's get a better proposal, and it could be done.
John, isn't
next
that
week.
part of what they do? Because I know, God bless you.
This one is so inadequate that it's going to be worthless.
You could just add a sentence that allows the planning director to ask them to expand the scope of the proposal in any way he deems appropriate.
No, I'm not voting for that. I want to see the specifics.
You don't
of
have to.
what-
You don't have to vote for
concerns.
it.
No.
Our attorney's giving us advice that addresses.
So
The rest of the board, that's fine.
Susan, a lot of the things that you said were inadequate in the applicant's traffic study.
Yeah.
Okay. How can we ask a consultant to give a proposal on things that don't exist? My point is that you have to ask your applicant to give you that information, and then our consultant can look at those things. I think if you start now, you will get our consultant saying what you should be looking at and what is not here is this, this, and this. I don't know if he'll focus on the same things that you came up with, but I think that's what part of what we'll get. But the main thing, the intersections that will be most highly impacted on this proposal is Navajo and 6 and 6N and their driveway. So that's why it says what it says.
Well, yeah, but it says the focus is only Route 6 in Navajo. I'm reading it. That's what it says.
Because that is, I think,
But-
as you said, that is all that is in the applicant's report.
Well,
Look, it's the applicant's money, right? And he's going to be paying for this. Let's get this. Let's see what our traffic consultant says about it, and he's going to point out shortcomings of it. And then we could go back and say we need you to address this, and then he's going to come back and they're going to address because our traffic guy said that, and then we're going to have to pass another resolution so our
And
traffic
then
guy can go back and look at that.
and Navajo's going to say, "Come on, guys, I've been waiting and waiting, waiting, and I want a decision on this."
I don't care what they have to say.
Well, you
What's the
should
difference what they
tell
have
them
to
what
say?
you want, which is what we've been saying.
Well, that's why I'm saying that let's
So-
tell them just the way we're telling Navajo what we want and all and all the other issues. Let's tell Transpo what else we want. Look at and identify. We're not telling him to identify the weaknesses.
How about
I'm not
this,
telling him
Susan?
that.
We could approve to send it out, but I will contact the applicant through his attorneys and say, here, we're sending the list in. This stuff needs to be addressed. We do not feel that it's going to be adequate for the study. And let me know if you want me to hold it up until you get these addressed. If they want to put it through and let our consultant address them and say that it's inadequate, then they can spend their money. But we'll give them an option. But I would, if they come back and say, no, let her rip and we'll redo what we need to from the consultant, I have no issue with that.
Ed, can you-
I'll take any, the list that you just talked about and give it to our consultant, and he can opine on, you should ask for this. But I think you should ask for it before you wait too long.
Ed,
I'm ready to.
Ed,
I'm
can
ready
we-
to give you a list tomorrow.
Ed, can we
You should.
add Adam's language to this resolution?
We can.
It's
of
one
course.
sentence
No,
that
that
basically.
would
and
be
then
totally
you
inadequate
could
as
just-
far as I'm concerned. I'd
That's
still vote
fine,
against it.
Susan. That's your opinion.
Whatever he thinks is appropriate to ask the consultant to address, you can address and just pass it and be done with it.
Yeah, but their proposal.
that's your
their
opinion.
Proposal, when Transpo says, I'm going to charge my glasses on $6,000, and this is what I'm going to do. And now you're saying John is going to tell them, well, we want you to address all of these things. Transpo can come back and say, well, no, that's going to cost $2,000 more.
Transpo could only do a proposal on what we have, and what we have
Is
is what we have.
inadequate.
But we should be telling the applicant that.
All right, I'll send him an email. We'll pull it this week. We'll look at it. Well, he's getting the email with all of our list. Susan, if there's anything you want more than what I just read off, get it to me tonight or add it to me when I send you the list, so we have it tomorrow morning. Thursday morning.
What's
when
that
we
going to
get
do? So you're going to send it. You're going to send it to the applicant and say, we're going to want some of this, and will you pay for it a
No,
zone.
I'm gonna tell him that
It's inadequate.
that this is what we feel is missing from your traffic study. That's why it's already on the list. And if before we send it out and spend $6,000 of your money, do you want to just have your guy touch it up? That's all.
Fine,
And
so
I
let's
will-
wait, get that answer, and then we can vote on it since we're
Yeah,
meeting
I
next
do-
week.
that-
We can
that's
vote
fine.
on it
We're
next
not,
week.
We're not.
Let's-
I don't think we're going to have. They were the reason we were putting it on. They're not going to be ready for next week. That's why we're doing the extra meeting. So we're not going to notice it. We were trying to get them through, but
Oh,
they're
so we're
gonna-
not meeting next week?
No,
I think we should have said that at the beginning of our meeting and let the public know that we're not
we
meeting.
never noticed it that we were. We said we would consider it, and we
Yeah, we
would
never
never
vote on
voted.
it, and she needs to put it in for a certain number of time.
Well, we never voted. It doesn't matter.
Right, but I'm saying if we did do it, you would have had to put it in.
Well, it should still be done.
Oh, I assumed that we were doing that. Well, now I have a free Tuesday night.
There you go.
I think we should put this in front of them, and then and have our traffic guy come back to us and say, hey, you know what, you missed all this
Let
stuff.
me give him the
All right,
option.
okay, all right.
It's not a big deal. Even if we have to call a special meeting, if he says no, go ahead with it. We'll call a special meeting and have a quick vote and be done with it.
All right.
But they're pushing to get things done. If they want to get it done at and they want to repay for something, I'm not going to. We've been here. We talk about it. Here it is. And now, if it's in writing, now get back and fix it. Things have to be in writing. Sorry, I'm just
Okay.
sick of wasting the time on it. So we're going to take that one off.
Okay.
And from the supervisor's office, authorize the supervisor to execute an amendment extending the contract with Thompson and Bender for community branding and communication services not to exceed $60,000. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed? I won't repeat my comments.
Yep,
They've been made
thank you.
multiple times at multiple budget hearings.
Yorktown, thank you for tuning in and
Oh,
coming.
I have a
and-
question. I have
oh,
a
yes.
question. I emailed you earlier, Adam. Can we have an update on an issue that has come up at previous meetings about the Fieldstone Manor? The clarification on the deed for the town-owned property, and also the
Susan, please talk into the mic.
I'm sorry, I'm talking to Adam behind, sorry. This came up at a previous town board meeting. There's some question, possibly confusion, about the status of the deed that gave some Fieldstone, 8-point-something acres of Fieldstone property to the town. It was supposed to be for future recreational facilities. So we need clarification. Is that deed a valid deed? And also, exactly at what point does the developer have to start constructing the recreational facilities that were required as part of the 2016 site subdivision approval? It's been said that he doesn't have to start it until after all the construction is done. Well, I think we have to know what percentage of the construction is done. We don't know that. So I'd like a clarification, and I think this board needs to know that so it could take action of whether the developer, whether we own the property legally at this point, and if so, why are cars and trucks being parked on town-owned land, which is, right now, the deed says the town owns the land, but there are cars and trucks being parked on it, and I'd like that clarified. Who gave them, did anybody give them permission to do that? That has to be clarified. And then two, when does the developer have to start the recreational facilities? That's very, very unclear. If he purposely decides, and this came out at at that joint meeting that we had last week, that if it's going to, and I'll use the monetary example that somebody from the Recreation Commission gave, if it's going to cost the developer $400,000 to build the facilities he's supposed to build, 3 pickleball courts, a basketball court, and a parking lot, just throwing out a number, $400,000. And if he's going to postpone some of his construction work, and he'll save $200,000 by not finishing his site plan improvements, he still comes out $200,000 ahead. So it's to the developer's advantage not to finish his construction. I think we need this clarified because there is a 2016 resolution that says he has to build these facilities, and it is on town-owned land. So I'd like clarification from the attorney on the status.
I'll have to get answers. I don't have answers to those questions.
Well, this has been hanging around for like 2 weeks already. When can we expect the answer?
You wanna-
Multiple answers.
Part of it, yeah, but not the whole thing. In researching this, we went back into the resolutions of the town board. The town board never accepted dedication of that parcel. We believe that that parcel was inadvertently filed by that person's attorney's wife when he passed away, since it was filed a year after he passed away. The owner doesn't recall filing that deed at all. Obviously, it's a planning board issue. This is with the planning board. But we find no record where it authorized the town to accept that parcel at all at this point in time. So I think the town board would have to decide whether they want to give that parcel back and follow the process that it should follow through planning, which is typically turned over to the town once everything is completed.
Is there, when you say the town did not adopt a resolution accepting the land, are you distinguishing parkland as opposed to just a piece of land that's not necessarily parkland?
Any of it would have to be dedicated to the town, and then the town would take that property, and once the town takes that property, then they can dedicate it as parkland through a resolution.
So that's why I'm asking Adam, as the lawyer, what is the legal status of that parcel? I need a legal answer. Do we or do we not legally own it?
He can't answer that because he doesn't have all the information yet, because we're still researching it.
I think we need some information.
well,
and that still leaves open the second question of when is the developer going to be required to start building, assuming that.
That's still up to the planning board. It's a site plan. It's up to the planning board to make those determinations, not the town board.
It is, but this is a town issue that involves the planning board, the planning department, the building department, and it's a code enforcement issue to enforce the conditions of an approved subdivision. And that, I think, there are multiple
This is
jurisdictions.
a planning board issue. The planning board is in charge of their site plan, not the town board. So they need to work out what the details are.
I don't know that the planning board, and this is again a question of law, does the planning board enforce the conditions of its approvals?
I think there's some extenuating circumstances here that we have to take into consideration before you can even make that decision.
What kind of extenuating circumstances?
And I think, like I said, it's a planning board issue.
And I would say if we don't have a resolution accepting it, we don't own it. That's.
But if we don't own it, then it's still, the second question, it's a two-part question. One, we need a determination based on.
But they're looking at that. I just
The second
gave my
issue is
opinion,
when,
Attorney.
if we don't own it and a proper deed has to be done, okay, the developer still has the obligation to build those recreation facilities. And at what point is the construction of the houses and any associated site improvements completed?
That's a determination by the planning board.
The planning board says when they have to do it is when they're done by the time they're done with the project.
You said that you wanted more information. You said that right after Diana said, we're still researching it. So, they are looking into it. Let's get a final determination. I agree with you. We need a final determination. But you're asking right now. You want the answer right now. They're still researching it. You have to give them the opportunity. You said it's going on for 2 weeks. They said they're still researching it.
Whose responsibility is it to research the legality of the deed? Is that the planning board's job?
I think multiple people have been helping out. There's records that our clerk would search through the county, through the town. There's things that the planning board, not the planning board, I'm sorry, the planning attorney might be privy to. There's also our town attorney. So it's a conglomerate of people working on this situation.
That's a horizontal work ethic.
Okay, I'll make a note and I'll bring it up a month from now and we'll see where we are and if these boards have to. And I think possibly, is it the prerogative or does it fit into the responsibility of the town board to let the planning board know that you are concerned about this issue and planning board, will you please look into it?
Hold on, you let the planning board know that at the meeting, that you were concerned and that we want to look into it. And you just heard from our town clerk that we're looking into it. So.
No, she's saying the planning board has to look into it.
No, she did not. She said, we're looking into it, but it is, in the bottom line, it's a planning board determination.
As to your second question. Your second question is a planning board determination because it's a site plan issue. So, I mean.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Good night, Yorktown.
They already have their hats on.